Hello and welcome back to my channel, Deku Fanfic. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off the second part of our series, What If Deku Becomes Spider-Man? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is JustLow from fanfiction.net. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Chapter 4, Birds and Bees. Radiant light from the summer sun shines down on the city, reflecting off each building like rows of skyscraping jewelry. Today, Spider-Man barely notices Musutafu's polished pearl appearance despite swinging across its rooftops way overhead. Web slinging, which often serves as a release and a joy for him, one of the things that makes being Spider-Man fun, holds no allure even on this bright morning. Ever since his reputation was tarnished, he frankly hasn't had much of a taste for anything lately. Not even his mother's infamous catsuit dish. He stops that train of thought, derailing it himself before chucking it out of his head, pretending to drop it to the pavement dozens of yards below. If there had been any saving grace, it had been his mom's attempts to cheer him up with catsuit. He'll be grateful for that much. She had suggested he see a therapist if he doesn't feel comfortable sharing his feelings with her. Even with doctor-patient confidentiality, Izuku isn't so sure he'd feel that much better revealing his double life as Spider-Man to somebody he never met before. Nah, this is better than any therapy. The boy's thoughts filter out through his mask-covered mouth since there's no worrying about anyone hearing him from so high up in the sky. This way, the only thing I feel is the wind against my face and the cool breeze in my tights. He does a little aerial maneuver as though to emphasize his point and grins a little under his mask upon pulling off the trick. Besides, it's not Spider-Man who needs help, but always somebody else that needs help. A shout loud enough to be heard even from his current heights draws Spider-Man's attention. It's as though on cue, and it isn't like he wants there to be trouble or anything, but it does make his hidden grin grow a bit now that he has something to take his mind off things. The vigilante readjusts his swing by firing a web line from his other hand so that the wire of webbing anchors to a building opposite of his current path. Then he pulls himself in the direction of the desperate cry for help. It's a familiar sight that he sees from the sky. A speck retreating from another speck amongst indifferent dots gradually grows until increasing to a size that shows what they really are. A purse snatcher fleeing from an innocent old lady comes into view for Spider-Man once he swings low enough. Instead of launching another web line towards the buildings suspended above, he spins a string straight for the thief. The web snags the purse that the crook is holding instead. Izuku's aim was just a little off, but he's still glad because it's better than missing his quarry completely. Hey, is that Gucci brand? Let me have a look. A jeering joke alerts the purse snatcher to the vigilante's arrival before the web line's firm pull does. The handbag flies into Spider-Man's glove palm. Hey, the purse snatcher stops short when he realizes the purse has now been snatched from him. Spider-Man looks the man up and down, seeing that the bag clashes with a rather punkish aesthetic. Purple mohawk, facial piercings. It just doesn't work. Give it back. Although the punk himself apparently disagrees. Funny you should say that. Spider-Man quickly wraps things up before hopping down to street level. Literally, the punk doesn't say much else with webbing sealing his mouth shut, nor does he do any more snatching or running away with the rest of his body as equally bundled up. I was just about to suggest the same to you. Spider-Man figures it's all in a day's work after that. Except, when he hands the purse back to its rightful owner, he doesn't quite get the thanks he expects or deserves. Menace. The grandma has quite a mouth on her when she spews a few alternative unaffectionate names at the spider-themed vigilante. She also starts whacking him with her purse, now having been supplied with a weapon from the very same person that she's using it on. Oh, hey, what gives? Spider-Man shields his head with his arms to block the blows that his spider sense deems insignificant to warn him of. But some of those blows land pretty hard, so he backflips away and sticks to a higher spot where the old lady won't be able to reach him. Unfortunately for the vigilante, the grandma gains enough attention with her behavior to garner a group of more civilians, and her backup has no qualms about throwing things at him to account for that distance. Tomatoes splat and cans crack when groceries get tossed his way. Spider-Man scrambles up the wall in a full retreat as he's verbally assaulted to go along with the flogging. He's only able to escape the crowd's booing by ducking into a dark alley. I didn't think my reputation was that tarnished. Izuku goes back to feeling dejected now that his effort to forget about his problems turned into another harsh reminder of them. The whole neighborhood, no, scratch that, the entire city has been turned against him. He solemnly shakes his head. It's not like he's in the hero biz for the praise, but it does bring him down a bit to be considered a criminal. A trash can sits opposite to a dumpster, probably separate disposals for whatever businesses interconnect to the back alley. Izuku bounds over to the can, peering inside to see that it's emptied. Part of him wants to shed his suit and throw it in there. Spider-Man no more. Might make for a good following headline to Hero or Menace. But that other side of him knows that he'd regret it later. Doing the right thing doesn't mean you'll always be rewarded. That's the funny thing about responsibility. Deciding that Spidey stays for now, he starts crawling his way back up the alley wall. He's just about to reach the top and hoist himself over onto the roof when he hears something back down below. It's distant but not as hushed as one might think a hidden conversation might be. Izuku twists himself to have his hands front first on the wall and climbs towards the source of noise. He makes sure to be much quieter than the two talking. And it is two talking, he can tell that much upon getting nearer to the voices. I'm the only trigger supplier left in Japan. One of the speakers has a buzzing drone in their tone that sounds more like a side effect of their quirk than intentional speech pattern. The decibel sharpens to a sting when they add, "You don't have much of a choice but to pay the price that I give you for it." The other talker has some sort of voice filter disguising their voice, the type that meshes a high pitch and a low pitch together to formulate one tweaked tone. You're forgetting that the Yakuza has drugs too. The distortion discloses their mood that it sounds like a monotonous machine, but it's anyone's good guess that they aren't happy just by what they're saying. I could always buy from them. Who do you think they get their resources from? The other voice's buzz becomes brasher. It seems they're both irritated by their discussion. Prices go up when it's a matter of resale value. A cross between hissing and humming tails the end of that sentence like a period. Spider-Man doesn't require his spider sense to know things are bound to escalate if the attitude these two are giving each other stays the same. Intrigue increased and now prepared to intervene if a fight breaks out, the wall crawler carries himself closer. He's able to see the two back alley conversationalists clearly, but they're unable to see him so long as they don't look up. He hopes things stay that way. You're sure they or none of your other resellers aren't able to replicate it? The altered voice belongs to a man dressed like a parrot. Hummingbird. Green wings that are way too sharp to be comprised of feathers are enclosed at his sides. A matching metallic mask shaped into a long beak hides his face. The other person also covers their tracks well, a lavender hood hanging over their head and draping down into a cloaked cape. If they were capable of pulling that off, then Trigger wouldn't be in such short supply with such a high demand. Small specks wisp around the cloth, weaving in and out of it. At Izuku's distance, it's hard to see just what those specks are though. That susurated sound emitting from the hooded figure suddenly seems a lot louder. Pretty soon, Izuku's spider sense buzzes with it. He looks about to find the source and discovers a small bee bumbling around beside him. Izuku waves a hand to shoo it away, but the bug is unbothered by his attempts to scare it off. The buzzing of the boy's spider sense gets more intense than the bee's buzzing, causing him to return his attention to the two people below. The hooded figure is staring back, or rather, a swarm of bees under a cowl directs their focus on him. We're being watched. The organized droning that composes a voice alerts the bird bad guy of Spider-Man next, which causes Izuku to backpedal on all fours along the wall that he's clinging to. Oh god. Izuku shudders when he realizes what those specks are under the lavender cloak, not the bees. When the cloak levitates and ascends out of the alley, Izuku is surprised to see it's the bird person who remains grounded. Wait, the flightless fellow calls after their partner in crime when they see that there is no honor amongst thieves. A sentiment that Spider-Man can agree with when spinning a web line to snag the swarm's fancy robe. What he said, nobody told you to buzz off just yet. Izuku gives the web line a good tug to reel his quarry in. What he gets is only the lavender cloak, the fabric flying off and a whole hive mind of bees exposed in the sunlit sky still managing to slip away. The lenses on Spider-Man's mask expand as much as they can when he sees there's seemingly no physical body to this baddie. The vigilante shakes it off, filing that one away for a later date. The buzzard villain is still here, at the very least, and he doesn't plan on letting that one get away as easily. And where'd you come from? Sesame Street. Spider-Man hops overhead just in case this fellow tries flying the coop too. He watches the end of the alley to make sure they don't try to make a break for it on foot either, which is where that empty trash can is. I did see Oscar's house close by, come to think of it. Spider-Man. The metallic wings that had been tucked behind the villain's back suddenly expand into steeled feathers that are sharpened to a point. He crouches while preparing for liftoff, or maybe he's just striking a fighting pose. Either way, the vigilante has his full undivided attention now. Was it the web pattern suit that gave me away? Spider-Man judges the jumping distance between himself and the villain before springing from his spot on the wall. It's all in good timing when he sticks the landing on a fiend taking flight. No, get off. The tackle causes some turbulence, but Spider-Man isn't so willing to oblige to that request. I'm not the one you should be going after. Even after hearing that, the airborne duo dive down towards street traffic, narrowly avoiding a brush with passing cars. You need to understand, I'm not someone you want to fight. I'm not a bad guy. Spider-Man's struggling ceases momentarily. I work for the Commission. But then he's back to trying to land his opponent. The Commission. Yeah, right. Let me guess, the leader of your secret organization is a stereotypical big fat guy with a diamond top cane and an ascot. Spider-Man's skepticism comes out in the form of sarcasm. He's well enough versed on heroes that he doubts this guy is an underground hero, and he's never heard of some task force before either. There is one way to know for certain though. Spider-Man grabs for the guy's beak-shaped face covering. No, the feathered Fink fights back. Spider-Man swerves as he's skybound, dodging a sweep of the villain's bladed wings. It takes some aerial acrobatics, but the vigilante manages to stay attached to his flying foe all the while. I'm trying to tell you that there's no need for this. The filtered voice practically screeches through the helmet's speaker system. Spider-Man shouts back to be heard over the wind whipping around them. You sure have a funny way of doing so. His back bangs against a rooftop's trimming when the bird baddie tries shaking him off again. The two twist whilst doing a nosedive, the maneuver meant to disorient and throw Spider-Man off. While Izuku might admit to getting a tad bit dizzy, he still manages to keep a hold of his pilot as a passenger. I'm starting to think you are a menace like the paper says. The villain glances back at their unwanted freerider with what must be contempt underneath the visor of their helmet. A menace to guys like you. Any and every day of the week, bird brain. Spider-Man cocks an arm back as he prepares to throw a punch, planning on cracking that stupid beak-shaped mask wide open like an eggshell. But his spider sense stops him short. He has to swing himself back to avoid getting clotheslined by a flagpole, which leaves him open for an uppercut from the villain. He maintains his hold, but in doing so, earns himself another shot. Izuku isn't content with letting a bad guy have their way with him, but there's not much else he can do if he doesn't want them to get away. The two grapple some more as they get close to a particular rooftop. They nearly crash into a billboard sign before slamming into the side of a water tower instead. It's there that Izuku loses his grip, and his opponent takes immediate action with that advantage. Izuku finds himself getting thrown into the elevated tank and sealed inside. If it were a giant waterspout, he's certain that he'd drown in it. Don't think that'll stop me. Izuku calls out from his water-enclosed prison with the vain hope that he'll be heard. A good spring in his step launches the boy up and out of the water tower. Except, once he's perched atop the elevated tank, he sees that the person who stuffed him inside is long gone. He gets flashbacks to similar situations with lockers and bullies, and he's sure that there'll be plenty more made when the next school semester starts. He just didn't think he'd be getting a head start of practice in beforehand. Great way to start the morning. Izuku huffs and grumbles to himself. He shifts from a squatted position to sit down before tugging a spandex sock off. The sopping material squelches when he wrings it out. Soaked to my skin and still hated by the general public, the vigilante allows himself to feel a bit of angst before sliding the spandex sock back on and getting over it. There's still a lot to be done on his to-do list, and he won't let a little plunge in the pool or some negative Nancy's ruin it for him. He was able to, at the very least, save his camera from getting water damaged, which means he'll have some shots to sell. And there's a particular beach he plans on paying a visit later to, even if he won't be swimming there. He's already done plenty of cooling off already, courtesy of his friendly neighborhood buzzard boy. Spider-Man hops off of his perch and spins a new web line in order to swing to his next destination. If he's fortunate, there won't be any more causes for interference, though he can't remember the last time he wasn't unfortunate enough to think that. Izuku can't help but contain some contempt for the pigeons swimming above him within the oceanic blue sky. When silvery feathers that have sunlight sheening through them gracefully descend rather than feces, though, he reconsiders his vendetta for birds and limits it to one in particular. It's not like they're all in cahoots with one another, or so he thinks. The lens on the boy's mask narrow when he shoots the sky a suspicious stare. It seems silly to be paranoid without his spider sense so much as registering a single tingle of threat, so he shakes his head and goes back to terraining the city. The boy bounds from rooftop to rooftop as he nears Juko News, only to discover an empty parking lot and darkened windows with their blinds closed. The lens on his mask blink with his eyes. A little creepage down the wall of the building gets him close enough to read a sign. The place is closed. Of all the dumb luck, he can't even sell the photos he got of his own humiliation like he had last time. He gives a rough sigh before scaling the building back up and away from any potential people booing him again. The last thing he needs right now is another put-down, which is why he's dreading the decision to make a second stop before heading home. A strand of webbing shoots out from Spider-Man's wrist and anchors itself to a cell phone tower. Then he's off. The sailing in the wind that's controlled by spinning strings sends him splashing through the sea-colored sky. Radiating off seashells in the sand are streaming strands of sunlight. The yellow glow along the smooth surface is simulating a burning grill with its graininess compacted. That long line formulates a perfect path only darkened along one edge by waves bordering into it. It's as clear as the stretch of water beyond it. Not a single speck of scrap metal or litter jets out from the beach. Izuku finished cleaning it all. Nobody would ever guess Takoba Beach had been a dumping ground for waste of varying types. Izuku would like to tell Itsuka that he's impressed by her handiwork, but she's nowhere to be seen. Which is a shame because that was the reason that he came here in the first place. He was hoping to explain himself to her and get unblocked, but that doesn't seem very likely now that she's finished doing her voluntary community service. The boy sighs, mentally scratching out another unmet task in his imaginary to-do list. First his flop with getting paid for pictures, and now this. He's been so down in his luck lately that he makes sure to watch out for any ladders or black cats. Neither of his identities can seem to catch a break. At this point, he wouldn't be surprised if he ran into one of his old bullies. That they'd be the only people actually around somehow feels practical. He quickly gets rid of that thought before he jinxes himself and makes it happen, instead opting for just swinging straight home. A lone seagull flaps its wings to slow its landing. Once planting itself on the beach, it looks up to see Spider-Man taking to the sky that it left. Still clad in red and blue, Izuku clandestinely crawls his way through his bedroom window. Spiders tend to creep carefully into corners, unnoticed and unheard. Whether the bite that gave him his inherent abilities passed that skill along or not, it's a quality matching his namesake that has helped him hide those definitive gifted powers from his mother. As quiet as a mouse, Izuku spares a second to thank God he wasn't bitten by a radioactive rat. The boy moves from his ceiling to his wall. It's not until the boy turns right side up that he notices a note taped to his computer, the note informing him that his stealthy entry wasn't necessary. His mom wrote a message letting him know she went out for the day. Izuku's smile is the first thing unveiled when he pulls his mask off. Not only does his mom deserve a day out for herself, but his luck finally allows for him to have some time to do some Spider-Manning without having to worry about her finding out. Izuku tosses the facial covering aside, allowing it to fall to the floor where dirty laundry casts a pattern of other clothing. Next, off comes the gloves and the web shooters. Those go on his desk where he keeps a miniature screwdriver and other tools to touch up the support equipment occasionally. But in the meantime, he opts for a seat at his computer to do some researching on other potential gadgets. After having so many encounters with villains but all of them managing to get away as of late, he's been trying to think of a solution. The notebook he tucked between quirk analysis journals contains some of those thoughts in the form of writing. He grabs the book and flips through its pages to find where he left off before syncing up the data with a web page. Izuku taps a couple of keys and follows along with what some forums say, jotting down what he agrees with and disregarding the rest. A miniature tracking device. That's his goal here. It'd be a plus if he could get the device to somehow also be in the shape of a spider. He figures that it'd make it all the less discoverable too. The only hitch in that idea is how difficult portably wireless relays tend to need more packaging in their mechanical makeup. In other words, he can't fit all the required tech into such a compact widget. Not if he wants the signal to span a good length, at least. So Izuku spends a lot of his time trying to think of a way to remedy that problem. The city does have a lot of cell phone towers, and there's always satellite dishes he can bounce the signal off of. Except, that becomes too contingent on the person he'd be tracking staying within city limits. Someone suggested having the opposite receiver carry all the tech on them to compensate, but that wouldn't work since that'd mean asking villains nicely to do so. He can't blame his online helpers though, since he has to keep details scarce enough for them to not figure out what he needs trackers for. Needing a break away from his computer to simply think to himself, he gets up to grab some clothes off the floor. A few sniff tests help him find a sweater and a pair of pajama bottoms that he can wear to cover up his spider-themed spandex. An idea enters his head then. He starts thinking about how he can use his senses. If he could somehow interlink his sense of smell or possibly his hearing to pick up a specific decibel, then that could compensate for a signal. Except that the matter of distance still remains a major issue. The range in which he'd be able to smell or hear is a fundamental factor that not even his spider abilities increased enough to resolve. And then it hits him like his palm against the side of his head. He has a built-in signal already. His spider sense. He figures that if he can somehow link the tracer to his danger sense that he'd be able to track someone based on how sensitive the tingling is. It's a bit of a long shot since technology and organic matter don't tend to mix well, but he also believes it's worth a try. Especially since this method would allow for him to make his tracking devices as small as possible per his preference. A quick search for forums about heroes having quirk support gear specifically built to aid or enhance their quirk helps to spur him on a little further. Present Mike has a speaker system created as a collar that helps him calibrate and control his vocal cords, for instance. Something that takes his internal power and makes it external doesn't seem all that impossible after all. Eventually, blueprints and plans lead to the actual activity of building these things. Izuku flips on his desk lamp as he leans forward to get a better look at what he's putting together. Tweezers maneuver metal parts that are nearly at a microscopic level. It takes a scientific mind to see what parts of the process work for this type of surgery. Wires that can leak fluid like blood vessels or veins are carefully connected. The spider sense that's meant to tune into and link with the device warns him when he nearly makes a mistake or two, preventing short-circuiting or spark bursts. His eyes narrow with intent focus. He'd probably have needed a pair of glasses to see something so small if not for his enhanced senses, which fortunately include sight. Izuku pays no mind to the bead of sweat rolling off his face while he works. He's in the zone now. Afternoon shadows move across his room, and at some point, the window in which he entered loses the sun. Izuku barely notices that or his mom peering into the room as night falls. He didn't hear her come home or call his name. But Inko is okay with that. She's just happy that her son found something to be passionate about again, something other than being a hero, little does she know. A cool splash of water washes over Tsukachi's face, the hands that had been cupping that water lingering rather than sliding away with what drips from his bottom jaw. He typically tries waking up to his mornings with a shower and then a cup of coffee, but today calls for this extra measure. The detective stops the sink from jacking up the department's plumbing bill, they don't need any extra cutbacks, and looks at himself in the mirror. He'd never win a competition against Eraserhead when it comes to who has the droopiest eye bags, but he can certainly qualify for second place. In addition to Spider-Man, Trigger is back on the streets, and that's splitting the underground hero's attention as much as it is the department's. He doesn't know whether he'd be lucky for the two cases to intersect or unfortunate, but he half expects some sort of connection sooner rather than later. And as such, that means making up a corkboard with strings and the whole 9 yards. Which if he's wrong that they won't connect, will mean he'd be doing that work for nothing. Meaning he won't get anywhere with either case and he'll be pulling another all-nighter. Tsukachi doesn't even bother wiping his face with paper towels. He lets the dampness remain as a reminder of how vexing the day is going to be. As though the universe is deciding to emphasize his point, he winds up bumping into Tamakawa on his way out of the restroom. Turns out the cat cop is back from his vacation. There's my favorite detective. The returning co-worker seems chipper despite having come back to duty. That's a surefire way to tell he's not been doing his paperwork. A smile playing at the tabby-headed officer's whiskered maw. Missed me. Can't say I have. Tsukachi may be able to disguise his tone, but he can't hide his own small smile. He'd never admit to it, but he may have actually missed the chucklehead. That doesn't mean Tamakawa is any less distracting though, and he really can't afford a distraction at this stage in either the Spider-Man or Trigger investigations. I'll catch you later though. The detective gives his colleague a friendly pat on the shoulder as he brushes by. That's it. That's all I get. Tsukachi can hear Tamakawa whining behind him, but he knows better than to stop or look back. The best he can do is give a half-hearted wave of his hand. Sticking around and playing into Tamakawa's neediness will only lead him to the break room or someplace other than his own desk, which is where he needs to be, and where he finds Eraserhead waiting for him. The detective raises an eyebrow, wondering if the underground hero snuck his way in or bothered going through the front desk, considering they hadn't crossed paths earlier. Regardless, Tsukachi wastes no more time in shutting his door and getting down to business. Hope I didn't keep you waiting. He pulls out a chair for Eraserhead to sit in before plopping down into his own. Eraserhead's only acknowledgement to an answer of how long he might have been waiting is a barely audible grunt. Was that Tamakawa's voice I heard? He's rather more interested in Tamakawa, which makes the man's poker face funny now that the detective knows what's hiding behind it. Tsukachi stifles a laugh, nodding. He happened to come back from his vacation today. The detective is already plotting how he can pit the cat-loving underground hero and the cat quirk cop together in the same room. Fortunately for him, he doesn't have to plot too much. We should get him in on this. Eraserhead suggests Tamakawa's involvement in the case. It might help to have a fresh perspective. He even offers a logical excuse for the partnership. Come to think of it, that excuse may be actually logical in a sense. To get an outside-looking opinion on the matter, from an officer who hasn't been around to know anything about the situation, could prove beneficial. Let's go grab him then. Tsukachi reconsiders the case and his co-workers return now that the vexation is able to have some merit to it. The least we can do with him is have him scope out the scene for us. Aizawa agrees with a nod that may as well serve as a smile. Somewhat surprisingly, the shy Hasekai aren't exactly subtle with their stronghold. It could have to do with that whole hiding in plain sight thing. Then again, they probably wouldn't have bothered erecting concrete walls to hide their property if that were entirely the case. Izuku bets they didn't build those barriers with spider-powered individuals in mind though, or the types that like to fly and get an aerial view. The old Japanese architecture all dates back to a pre-quirk era. Suited up as Spider-Man, Izuku infiltrates the site as stealthily as he can. He remembered the Yakuza being mentioned during whatever illegal transaction he interrupted and decided that it'd be a good lead to follow up on, if not for the sake of testing his newly developed spider tracers. And apparently, that hunch was as good as any instinct to act upon. None other than Bird Brain himself stands across from what must be Yakuza representatives. Gripped in the fiendish Sphinx talons is a plastic bag that makes it evidently clear where the payload is. Izuku figures whatever drug that living hive mind had to offer is also available here. If one seller falls through, then there's always the next best option. This bird apparently needs a little help when it comes to getting high. So, Izuku places his camera in a good spot to snap some shots and takes into account what some wildlife photography may have to offer. No wonder Toucan-Sam got the serial mascot job instead of you. Spider-Man flips from the wall to a more revealing spot where the group of baddies can see him. You may have the Fruit Loopiness down, but you'd make a bad spokesperson if kids saw this. It does the trick. They're focused on him and not his hidden camera. Now, he can get down to business. You again. You're ruining everything. The Fruit Loops mascot retaliates towards Spider-Man's second interference with a literal lashing out of his winged arm. The sweeping appendage releases a barrage of bladed feathers that are flung full force at the vigilante. Spider-Man contorts his movements to outmaneuver the projectiles before sticking his landing on a water fountain center statue that's made to look like some sort of unicorn lady. I have a knack for that. He keeps up his quippage and takes to dodging some cover fire from the Yakuza people next. The gun-toting thugs are easy enough to dispatch. A little webbing here and there with occasional front flips or back flips manages to take them down quickly. It's their feathered friend that Spider-Man wants to keep an eye on. Stay out of business that you don't understand. He's not sure whether to consider himself lucky or not when he sees the bird hasn't tried flying the coop. While the villain staying grounded does make the vigilante's job easier, it does seem a little odd for the bird brain to be choosing fight in their fight or flight response. I've played enough Monopoly to understand what's important. Spider-Man snatches the money bag with a thick line of webbing, yoink, and catches it in the same extended hand. The beaked baddie's mask tilts, noting the cash grab, which is a little less of a reaction than Spider-Man had been expecting. Nevertheless, he takes to the water fountain statue again for a good vantage point and prepares for what comes next. What comes next is a buzzing, but not the typical type that he gets from his spider sense. Spider-Man glances up, recognizing the sound as a signature to the swarm of bees heading his way. It looks like someone else wants the honeypot. Izuku has enough time for one last wisecrack before dropping down to avoid getting stung to death. He lands in the fountain's water pool, hoping that the theory about water warding off bees holds true. It's strange that the cool splash of water loses its initial chill seconds after. A stroke of heat hovers over Izuku's back. For a moment, he fears the worst, that he's been stung or hit somehow. Except, when he turns over, he sees the source of warmth targeting someone other than him. A wrist-mounted flamethrower from the bird villain burns the swarm with a streak of fire. Izuku shields himself from the orange consumption as well as he can in what may as well be a kiddie pool. Confused by their spat and very much not wanting to get caught up in it, Izuku dives away from the two villains. In doing so, he finds himself by the gate of the facility, which so happens to be the entrance, which so happens to have a police officer outside of it. The cop has a cat-like head, ears perked and eyes dilated, as he stares up at Spider-Man. Izuku looks down at the clear bag of money that he's holding in his hand and then back up. He has flashbacks to his framing with the transfer truck and tenderly hoists the yen sack out to emphasize his innocence within the misunderstanding when he says, "This isn't what it looks like." But it very much looks too much like what it looks like, he guesses. Because the officer's response is to draw his weapon and shout, "Hold it right there. Maybe you should hold on to it instead." Spider-Man tosses the bag towards the law enforcer. As expected, the officer's innate reaction is to catch it, which means dropping their gun, which means Spider-Man can get away without getting shot. Tamikawa gawks when he's left with the sack of yen. He'd been sent to the Shai Hasakai stronghold to perform reconnaissance. He wasn't expecting all of this. To be fair to the vigilante, neither had he. Spider-Man swings around an old architecture before landing on its roof. From there, he sees the swarm of bees being dealt with. The druggie is also a murderer. Go figure. And now the murderer wants to flee the scene. Not on my watch. Izuku does what he had anticipated he'd be doing in coming here. He performs a field test of his new support gear and fires a spider tracer from his wrist shooters. It lands on the villain's calf and stays. After watching it fly away, he starts listening to his spider sense and puts the tracer to the test. The bird-themed villain, along with the spider tracer attached to him, gradually glides from the sky to the mid-level height of buildings. It's there that his front-facing flight path redirects itself into a feet-first landing. Like a platform prepared for him, he comes upon a broad balcony with equally wide glass panes opened up for him. That entry overlooking Misutafu leads into a dimmer setting with an oval desk and other office materials. Seated with hands clasped and fingers interlocked, overlooking all of this all the while, is an old woman. Izuku keeps his distance, but that's fine and dandy, since his camera does actually have a zoom function despite all of the lies he told Tokuda about using it beforehand. The lady has a stoic and steely expression as she watches a villain fly right into her office, so he supposes the two must already be acquainted. Considering her ash blonde hair is slicked back and her attire consists of a suit jacket along with a costly necklace, he's starting to believe there may as well be a commission involved. Well, at least his guess about it being run by some large guy with an ascot didn't turn out to be the case. Progress report. The woman's voice is low, but it still carries in the wind well enough to be heard by Izuku's enhanced sense of sound. Even so, the boy cranes his neck and angles his head to turn an ear closer. The villain's voice is just as tonally deep, more so because of the filter in his mask, but it does create quite a tense atmosphere, at least, in Izuku's humble opinion. Spider-Man intervened again. The vigilante feels a little tense himself at the mention of his name, but there was still a relative resolution to my assignment this time. Kyuin Hachisuka. That name doesn't ring any bells in Izuku's head, but he keeps listening anyways. It turns out that there isn't much to listen to though when a holographic bio appears above the desk between the lady and her Avafauna assassin. Izuku snaps a silent shot of the bio. It lists a few aliases Hachisuka went by like Queen Bee at a point. Apparently now, this lady goes by Swarm. Considering she's a living hive mind, Izuku supposes that makes enough sense. And then, a red X crosses her out, the image fading as the crimson lines cover over the bio. Eliminated, the villain reports her dead. Izuku's heart clenches at that. He starts feeling guilty for not trying to intervene more. Being burned alive can't be a good way to go. Along with the drug, Izuku refocuses at the mention of that trigger stuff they were peddling between themselves and the Yakuza. There must be some sort of power struggle between criminal factions, he thinks. The villain produces a tiny vial, setting it upon the desk. The lenses on Izuku's mask shift between squinting and widening. He doesn't recall this guy snatching any of that stuff during their scuffle. They call me Vulture because I take care of the scraps. Vulture must take some pride in that. Then Trigger can finally be laid to rest with the Shai Hasakai. The commission lady takes the vial and looks at it closely but lacks any actual interest in what she's holding. Vulture nods, moving away from the desk so that he's facing the balcony. Izuku hunches down, worried momentarily that he's been spotted. The red and blue color scheme of his Spider-Man suit seems like it would stand out. Fortunately for him, it somehow doesn't. Vulture doesn't notice that he's being spied on, which must be the reason why he's so comfortable with removing his mask. We can get Night Eye's agency to follow through. The voice filter falters and fails as the helmet dislodges from the man's head. It could prove troublesome if anyone were to find out the number 3 hero was masquerading as a villain. The pro hero Hawks shakes his sweat-slickened blonde hair loose once the beaked helmet is removed. The wind ceases. Spider-Man slips, startled enough to lose his firm foundation of sticking to a building. After he catches himself from falling, he releases a breathless choke of a gasp. It's hard to breathe behind his own mask. Izuku's forefinger falls numbly on the shooter switch of his camera. The DSLR snaps a picture of the unmasked fiend. A hefty heave carries the bag high enough to thud against Tsukachi's desk. All of the yen inside spreads with the landing of the bag's bottom, pushing pens and other materials like the detective's stapler aside to make room for it. Tamakawa pants heavily, having carried the sack of money all the way to the office. Behind him, Eraserhead offers a cup of water. The officer greedily takes it before flitting his tongue to lap it up, much to the underground hero's amusement. "Where'd you get this?" Tsukachi refrains from gawking at how much dough is on his desk currently. It's not likely Tamakawa made a withdrawal from an ATM while he was out, though he doubts an enforcer of the law would rob a bank either. A Yakuza, Tamakawa breathes out his answer eventually enough, though that only raises other questions until further elaboration is given. Spider-Man was holding it. The officer gestures with his free hand as though to demonstrate that it's clean and he's not the thieving type. Guess the papers are right about him turning over a new leaf from vigilantism to crime after all. Tsukachi doesn't keep himself in check anymore and allows a grievance sigh to escape his downturned lips. "How did you get a hold of it then?" Eraserhead prompts Tamakawa to keep sharing details. As he does, the underground hero simultaneously works on refilling the cop's cup of water. "He, threw it at me." Tamakawa pauses as he recalls the order of events. Suddenly he's itchy behind the ears and he needs to scratch at his head. "So what you're saying is," he tossed the money bag back. Eraserhead crosses his arms over his chest while giving Tsukachi a quick glance. The detective swallows and nods. What else did Spider-Man do? Tsukachi looks between the bag of yen and his partner while reconsidering his opinion on the web pattern person. He actually looked to be feuding with the Yakuza, Tamakawa hums while trying to come up with his own theory on what transpired. Could it be some sort of intergang dispute? Eraserhead refrains from face-bombing. He's had students brighter than this. Not likely, the underground hero deadpans. But rather than waste any more time spelling things out for the officer, he heads for the window to carry out his own fieldwork. "I'll be in touch." "Sure thing." Tsukachi nods despite the man's back being turned to him. After Eraserhead is gone, he looks back down at the bag to find the vigilante's usual calling card is left inside. "Thought you could use a raise in your allowance. Courtesy of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." Not even nightfall can cool the summer shimmer in the air. Ripples of erosion waft through puddles and potholes. Dust mounds roll and billow into shadowed crevices. Moths flutter as they struggle to remain stagnant within a lamppost tint of yellow light. It's a repeated array of those miniature beams and even smaller ponds that forge a path for Tokuda to terrain. And it's that trail that he follows to his parked car. He stops short so that he can unlock its doors, but before the man can fish his car keys out from his pants pocket, he catches a glimpse of something in his peripheral vision. A red and blue blur. A colored haze that comes to a halt atop his car and perches itself there once becoming clearer. Tokuda instinctively staggers back, startled, and drops his keys the way someone might do in a horror movie. As Spider-Man, Tokuda fights the urge to take his glasses off and clean them to make sure that what he is seeing is legit. Instead, he opts for pushing the bifocals up the bridge of his nose in order to readjust the lens over his eyes. To what do I owe the pleasure? It takes him a moment to regain his composure, but he manages to do so nevertheless. Contrary to popular belief about the youth these days, I myself do a little more reading than just Meg. Spider-Man starts by trying to smooth out the strangeness with a joke, but he can see that it's more of a miss than a hit when Tokuda doesn't laugh. Resting on his haunches, he goes for making his body language less intimidating instead. "You like to write about me quite a bit." He also tries keeping his voice even to not make it sound like he's upset or anything. Though Tokuda is more occupied trying to place the familiarity of the vigilante's voice rather than the tonal vibe of it. He nods nonetheless, agreeing with Spider-Man's sentiment. They're hot and fresh news that sells. The photojournalist pauses to consider what he says or does next before daring to add, especially what with your whole turning over a new leaf. "You got it all wrong." Spider-Man shakes his head. "I'm still just a guy trying to do good and only good." The vigilante clarifies his vigilante status with enough waving of his hands to show he's genuinely passionate about emphasizing that point. "There was a whole misunderstanding with this other person posing as me, and then another misunderstanding with me holding a bag of money that wasn't mine, and now everyone thinks I'm their not-so-friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." One corner of Tokuda's mouth twitches with amusement as he holds back a smile. "Is that why you're here? To set the record straight?" He bends down to pick his keys up off the ground now that he feels safe enough to take his eyes off the masked figure. "I don't presume you'd be open to an interview about it." But he still makes sure to right himself quickly and continue making eye contact with the strange lens on that mask. Spider-Man physically recluses at the mention of an interview. Not quite, but there's a hint of humor from him about the prospect too. Tokuta is glad that he returned his field of vision to the vigilante when the spider-clad do-gooder makes a move from point A to point B, point A being Tokuta's car and point B being the post that's a few feet closer. But while we're talking about sharing the truth, that does have something to do with why I'm here. The vigilante's fingers wriggle between the material waistline of his spandex to procure something. Tokuta's eyebrows raise when he sees what Spider-Man has to give him are printed pictures. He takes them, a little hesitantly, but can't help letting curiosity get the better of him to have a look. Where'd you get these? It starts as an honest question probing for an honest answer, but then he sees what it is that he's actually looking at. This is. Our mutual contact has his ways. Spider-Man keeps it vague, but Tokuta gets the hint. Midoriya. The shot composition is familiar enough now that he looks at the photos closer, but Tokuta has to swallow some saliva to keep his mouth from running dry when making that connection. Amazing shots for a story are one thing, but how the kid got them is another. Yeah, but I think we both know why I'm the one giving these to you and not him. Spider-Man sounds a little more reserved now, which would be odd by contrast with his personality upon introduction, but Tokuta can understand somewhat under this set of circumstance. Tokuta breathes a husky breath out through his mouth, something much heavier than a sigh. It makes sense why keeping anonymity with such a sensitive subject being brought to light is essential. The poor kid would be put in grave danger otherwise. Hero society is one thing, but society in general and how they'll react is another thing entirely. Hawks, the number 3 ranked hero, is secretly operating as a well-known villain. And the one to expose that information is Izuku Midoriya, or rather, now, Tanio Tokuta. Why come to me with this? Why not a bigger press? Tokuta hides the compromising images in his coat as though somebody is spying on them. Considering the situation, someone may very well be. Tokuta glances about, becoming slightly paranoid. But what Spider-Man does next clears the man's mind completely. Spider-Man hops down to stand like a normal person and says, "Because Midoriya trusts you more to do the right thing with it," the sincerity in that statement slamming Tokuta enough to jar his thoughts. And so do I. Spider-Man holds out his hand. It takes Tokuta a moment to realize what the gesture is for, but he does take the extended hand and he does shake it. He steals and resolves himself, regaining his nerve. "Then I guess it's up to me not to let you down." The photojournalist gives Spider-Man a lopsided smile. "Oh, you mean each of us, me and Midoriya?" Spider-Man cocks his head to the side, somewhat tracking that smile. "Right." Tokuta winks at the vigilante. The eyes on Spider-Man's mask widen ever so slightly. He doesn't say anything for a second before the lenses return to their usual size and he begins backing away. "Right." The vigilante clears his throat with a feigned cough. "Right." Before performing a backflip and crawling back into the shadows that he came from. No matter how gently he closes the door, it still shuts with a resounding click. The snap of the lock makes him wince. And as though to confirm he should be worried about his mother overhearing his arrival back home, the lights to the room flick on so suddenly that a flash grenade may as well have gone off. Izuku's eyes don't need to fully recover from the shock of bright adjustment for him to know it's his mom standing by the light switch. She has one arm crossed over her stomach, the one holding the light switch moving to fold over and join it. "You're late," she states the obvious, but Izuku still acts strangely surprised. The boy gives his mom a sheepish smile. "Really? I didn't notice." His smile wavers when his mom raises an eyebrow. Her eyes move to a window, his eyes darting to track her glance. It's pitch black outside. Izuku has to swallow to keep his jaw from unhinging. Is it not daylight savings time? But that means being able to talk and say something stupid that'll dig him a deeper grave. He knows he messed up and made things worse when Enko's gaze comes back to him with a hardness to it. She practically glares right into his soul. "This is beginning to become a bad habit of yours." She speaks sternly enough that Izuku knows better than to keep joking around about the subject matter. "I know, Mom, I really did just lose track of time though." He knows it isn't the greatest of excuses, but there's not much of an alternative. Subconsciously, Izuku adjusts the collar of his shirt to be pulled up a little higher on his neck, a subtle move to hide his spider-themed spandex beneath it. "Where do you go when you stay out so late?" Enko's stare softens as she uncrosses her arms to reach out with. She moves to grab him, maybe give him a hug. Is it a girl that you're sneaking off to go see?" But Izuku jumps back to avoid getting caught up in it. "What? No, Mom, no." He feels his face flush red from embarrassment. He'd rather get accused of being Spider-Man than have to go through any sort of girl talk with his mom. Well, maybe not, but the pros and cons of either difficult conversation compare surprisingly close. Enko notices his physical reaction, withdrawing a bit to give him some space. She holds her hands up as a sign that she doesn't mean to put any pressure on him. But she's quite literally backed him into a corner. "Okay, is it a boy then?" Her change of pace, slow and steady approach is a bit too cautious for his liking now. "No." Izuku buries his face in his hands. He's not even able to look his own mom in the eyes anymore. Yet, he can feel her presence lingering over him even without his spider sense, and that's only making things worse that he forces himself to look at her again anyways. Enko backs up a bit, something Izuku is grateful for, but she still doesn't let it go. "It's okay, Izuku, I really don't care whether." "Mom." Izuku interrupts her before that line of conversation can go any further. "Romance is one thing but sexuality is another. Can we please just drop it?" He all but pleads for her to stop. Inko is hesitant but ultimately agrees with a nod. Fine, she sighs and finally allows him some more breathing room with a complete backup. We'll put a pin in it for now. Thank you. Izuku releases his own sigh, one full of relief. But that was a mistake. He really should have known better than to lower his guard. But I think it's still time that I tell you about the birds and the bees. Inko unknowingly gives her son some equivalent of a heart attack with that suggestion, just to be safe. Izuku has to brace himself against the wall to keep from falling flat on his face. I've already had enough birds and bees for one day. His grumbled mumble of complaint leaves his mouth before he can think better of himself to utter it aloud. You what? Inko does a complete 180 to face her son again when she hears what he said about birds and bees, which sends Izuku into a flustered tizzy of flailing his arms around. Wait, Mom, it's not what you think. He squeaks each protest a higher decibel than the last until his screams shift into screeches. Inko doesn't let her baby boy get away with playing innocent. Not this time. She tackles him to the floor, where she wrestles the reckless youth to make sure he doesn't re-escape, and prepares to teach him a lesson or two, even if she has to silence his shouts by shoving a bar of soap into his mouth in order to clean it. Chapter 5, Staying Static. There's a better likelihood of a villain attack having shaken his bedroom than an earthquake to have caused it to be in such disarray. So, standing on his ceiling with his hands on his hips as he surveys the messy space, he decides that will be the story he goes with should his mom walk in before he finishes cleaning it up. At some point, the boy must have mistaken the waste bin for his hamper, since that's where a good portion of the dirty laundry takes residence. Ironically, things like crumpled paper and tissues or empty soda cans are distributed in the opposite container. All of his reading and writing material looks as though it was flung off his bookshelves to occupy his floor rather than his desk. Izuku huffs aloud to nobody in particular but himself. Kicking it all under his bed to hide it won't be enough this time around. But that's where he starts. The small space makes for a good shadowy crevice to cover up a good margin of the junk. The drawers on his desk are already too filled with other stuff to cram anything else in there. The boy's closet is a maelstrom of pants and shirts that he'd just given up on hangers. The all-bed technique is a reliable one. It's one he knows very well. So does his mom, but he figures he'll cross the metaphorical bridge when he gets there. Izuku just has to make sure his Spider-Man stuff stays out of it, at the very least. He can't risk any accidental discoveries. So the boy grabs his spandex suit and web shooters to stuff some spot that they won't get found like everything else. Izuku holds it all in his hands, feeling the weight of it. He winds up holding onto it in more ways than one, staring at the spider symbol etched in a webbing pattern. With UAS entrance exam coming up, he figures he could now stand a chance to get into the hero course. But there's a hesitation to try, not only because of the whole secret identity thing or the vigilantism charges he'd get, but, well, there's a certain responsibility to what he's decided to do with what he's been given, and he might not be able to do anything until he gets a license if he goes down the UA route. Izuku sighs, squeezing the hemming of his costume. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he doesn't get to dwell on those thoughts for long. He doesn't need his spider sense to pick up on the handle to his room starting to turn, but he does wish it had alerted him, considering that could very much mean danger right about now. Quickly coming out of his rumination and acting on impulsive instinct, Izuku throws the suit up and webs it to the ceiling. His mother opens the door to just miss him hiding his web shooters behind his back. Izu, she starts, Mom, but he's too fueled by the sudden spike of adrenaline in his system to let her. He tries covering up his jumpy and fidgety behavior with a smile, but it comes out forced. What are you doing here? His voice is just as strained. Inko pauses in the doorway, noticing her son's strangeness straight away. She tries and fails to hide her concern that's coupled with confusion from showing on her face, an expression of scrunched proportions creasing her aged wrinkles. After a second, I live here. She treads carefully with her response while gauging the situation a bit more. Izuku nervously laughs, backing away and turning his body to continue hiding the web shooters behind himself when his mom steps further into the room. I meant, what are you doing here right now, in my room, right now? The boy winces when his mom gives him another troubled look, without knocking first. Inko's eyes hone themselves into perfect slithers, narrowing to such a finely squinted point that she should be able to find any discrepancies in her child. It's the type of critical glare she'd give him when he'd come home claiming to be fine while wearing a hoodie to hide bruises or burns from being bullied. Right now, strangely, she's having a hard time identifying the source of his strange behavior. He's gotten eerily good at hiding things from her lately. It admittedly makes her sad that he's trying to keep secrets from her. She's tried not to turn it into an issue, but if he persists on, Inko's eyes widen when she finally finds something to zero in on. A small speck of some sticky substance, liquid but elastic enough to not spread into a bigger puddle. It's a bit of the webbing fluid that was used to hide Izuku's Spider-Man suit. A part of the formulaic gossamer came apart and dropped to the floor. But Inko doesn't know that. She keeps looking down instead of up. And so, the woman comes to her own conclusions about what the white material is. To the mother, it suddenly makes sense why her son is acting so sweaty and weird right now. A teenage boy full of raging hormones with something to hide from his parent. I'll be sure to knock next time. Inko apologetically retreats from her son's bedroom. She closes the door enough to give him privacy but also doesn't fully shut it just yet so that she can quickly tell him, "Come downstairs when you're finished." The brunette then hurriedly leaves the boy to his vices. Izuku is left confused for a second, not completely comprehending what just happened, but ultimately accepts it as his chance to lower his guard. A relieved sigh escapes his mouth in the form of an exhale. He's had more close encounters than he'd like to have when it comes to guarding his secret identity. A little touching up to better hide his stuff before heading downstairs is definitely needed now more than ever if he bothered to doubt it. When Izuku finishes hiding the last of his vigilantism materials, he heads for the living room. There, he falls back onto the couch where he can stretch out across it, and pulls out his phone to look through the latest scoops in Hero Feed. As expected, there's the digitization of JUCO news blowing the whistle on Hawks being wrapped up in the criminal underworld. A court date has been set and the hero's license temporarily revoked. Obviously there's going to be arguments on the internet with people picking sides. But Izuku had an up-close and personal experience firsthand to know the truth himself that he just closes the app and focuses on his mother entering the room. "You gonna make room?" Inko pauses with her hands on her hips when she sees her son hogging up all of the couch space. Izuku moves his legs so that his mom can sit next to him. He draws his knees up closer to his chest while shifting to be snuggled closer to her. The two lean on one another, Inko draping an arm across her son's shoulders to give him a half hug. Tomorrow is the big day, Inko holds him a little tighter than just a squeeze. "Are you sure you still want to try for UA?" She meets his eyes with an affectionate and tender look that appears as though it could water and spill over with tears at any moment. Izuku smiles at her as he nods. UA is still good for their general education's course. His reply somehow doesn't come out as confident as he had intended though. And a mother knows best, always taking notice of such things, especially in Mama Midoriya. She must hear the lingering desire he has to try out for the hero course since the look in her eyes starts to change ever so slightly to something sterner. "Oh, and is that the only department that you're interested in?" She prods him gently with a delicate tone, but Izuku is able to pick up on her tells just as much as she can hiss. He starts to weasel out of her hold and shifts slightly apart from her on the couch. "You wouldn't also happen to be considering trying for another course, would you? I mean, it doesn't hurt to try, right?" Izuku accidentally lets a bite of bitterness slip out and immediately regrets it. He knows that Inko is only being cautious because she cares, and for all she knows he's still quirkless. But that doesn't make it any easier to have these conversations reminding him of how she and the world constantly perceive him as a fragile being. Inko reaches for one of his hands, placing hers over his. "It doesn't, dear, but..." She pauses to think about her phrasing of words before committing to anything she might regret saying. "I just don't want you to be disappointed if it doesn't work out is all." Izuku slips his hand out from under his mother's before using it to push himself up from the couch. "You already have it in your head that I'm gonna fail." The boy conveys his betrayal with an expression of disbelief. Inko stands up with him. "No, of course not," trying to deny his claim. But then Izuku sees past her, at where a print of JUCO news is sprawled out and sharing the article of Hawk's exposure. He sees that and understands where she's coming from, why she's so extra worried and why she especially doesn't want him getting into the hero profession now more than ever. He hangs his head, his words coming out as a garbled grumble. "We didn't even specify which department for you to think that way." But Inko hears through his mumbles nonetheless. Inko's eyes widen as though she's seeing the truth in that, realizing that he's right, that they never defined that they were talking about him trying for the hero course in particular. He could have been expressing interest in the support department for all she knew. "Izuku." She reaches out for him in an attempt to apologize. But Izuku pulls away, not allowing her to have that opportunity. I'm going out. I think I need to go for a walk and get some fresh air." Inko is about to refuse, opening her mouth to tell him that he can't. But then she thinks better of herself and closes it. She simply nods, a sad but understanding gesture. Izuku hesitates to turn on his heel and walk away. He feels bad seeing his mom's face look like that. But he does need the time to think and cool off. So he ultimately turns and leaves. Hues of blue blend with the sandy beach bar. Sky and sea meet to cast a streak of white, sunspots shimmering until becoming one broad reflection. Grains glisten as a giant cluster occasionally sharing space with shells of faded pink shades. Izuku stands just outside of it all, taking it in like a painting brought to life. This is the handiwork of Itsuka Kendo and it never gets old to see. He recalls that cleaning up the beach had been a part of her training to get into UA. Her aspiration to join the hero course had spurred him on as Spider-Man, and now it's motivating him to want to try and do more as Izuku Midoriya. The boy fishes his phone out of his pants pocket. He's still blocked by her, but he's starting to think there's a way to change that. It's a small chance, but one he doesn't think is impossible. A breeze brushes through Izuku's curly mess of green hair, locks blowing back as though the wind is an invisible comb. The reckless youth breathes in the air. His freckled face forms a smile. An idea has just become a plan. Izuku shoves his phone back into his pocket before turning and jogging off from the boardwalk. The smile he wears starts stretching into a grin when he picks up speed to run for his destination. Okay, on second thought, this might have been a bad idea. If Izuku's head were to crane itself back any further, it'd be prone to snapping off. But that's how high the wall to UAS entrance exam field testing site goes. Not even Mount Lady would be able to reach the top so easily. The boy makes an audible gulp when swallowing a harsh intake of air, feeling smaller than a spider in this situation. He had thought to himself that he'd be able to easily sneak into UA in order to gain a tactical advantage of the practical portion of the exam. If not for his own sake, then to give Izuku the upper hand. It seemed simple enough to manage with spider powers. After all, spiders go undetected all day every day. Seeing high-tech scanners, turrets, motion detectors, and all other sorts of fancy security equipment advanced enough to make his spider sense rattle his bones has made him rethink it a bit though. Izuku is about to turn around and walk away, almost ashamed of himself for even considering cheating. Even if it's to impress and win back a girl's favor, he knows it's wrong. But his shoe sole kicks a pebble that bounces into a ventilation exhaust, and he takes note of it. It's such an easy way to bypass all of the pesky security, and since he's already made the trip over here, he backpedals his thinking to sneaking in. Pretty soon, Spider-Man is infiltrating the most prestigious hero school in all of Japan. The red and blue figure scurries through the ventilation system, occasionally batting away a cobweb left behind from his kindred brethren. The bright side is that it's cool air flowing through the shaft and not heat, which with this summer weather is more of a blessing than one. He's glad there's no rain to wash this spider out of this particular spout. Spider-Man breathes through his mask, glad that he kept a spare on him. A hero should never leave home without their uniform, just like his mom taught him a man shouldn't go anywhere without their wallet. Especially if that hero is a vigilante and they need to keep their identity a secret. And especially if that already wanted fugitive, Izuku likes to use that term loosely, is in the act of breaking and entering. As the vigilante peels back a thin sheeting of galvanized duct, he prays that he isn't caught. It'd really suck to have to go up against the heroes who may be the ones teaching him. There's a brief moment where he wonders if that's what the practical exam is for the hero course and if this whole reconnaissance mission was for nothing. And then he sees the giant mechanized Goliath stationed at charging ports. It's like he walked, or crawled, into some sort of sci-fi military movie. The expressionful eyes on Spider-Man's mask convey his awe. It makes sense to have examinees go up against disposable foe enemies of such design. And yet, there are so many, not just in numbers but in that state of design. Spider-Man hops from the wall to the ceiling, moving deeper into the massive supply station. There are some robots that look like child's play, and then there are others that are seriously no laughing matter to have to deal with. Spider-Man lowers himself on a web line, viewing one of the bots up close and personal. It makes no difference that he performs his examination upside down. He can tell from a slight rapping of his knuckles on the bot's base that it's mostly hollow, which means it's very combustibly punchable. The vigilante alters his position on his string to view behind the machine. There, he finds a button on the robot's exposed back. It appears to be some sort of deactivation switch. The one beside it is less forgiving. Spider-Man sways with his body on the web line that he dangles from until he gains enough momentum to pivot over. The robot he lands on is poised in a low crouch, with shields guarding its legs and two tail-like extensions covering its surface area akin to that of a scorpion. Spider-Man shivers, slightly scared of this one out of some strange instinct. It has 3 camera lenses for eyes on its front and a button on its belly for turn-off beneath it instead of on top. Spider-Man's reflexes kick in, his body moving when his spider sense shouts at him to move. For a second, he worries that the robots may have turned on. When he lands perpendicular to them though, he sees that they are still disabled. What he finds himself facing instead is the back snap of Eraserhead's capture cloth. The underground hero coils the fabric around his neck like it's a wearable scarf. It's a fashion statement as bold as web-patterned spandex. Eraserhead raises an eyebrow, as though he himself is only getting to see who he's quarreling with for the first time. "You're the one breaking in here." It's supposed to be a question, but it's said matter-of-factly. "You're about the right height for an 8-year-old. I'm 14. Izuku's instinctually offended shout of protest comes out whinier than he'd like for the proven point of his age to attest to. Eraserhead seems unfazed nevertheless, simply doing a once-over of the boy's height to reconfirm his estimation. "Well, then you should be taller." The underground hero's drawl carries past his analytical eyes, and Izuku finds himself ignoring the verbal assault in favor of paying attention for a physical advance. This isn't what it looks like. Spider-Man holds up his hands in an attempt of effort to show he's no threat. "You aren't breaking into a highly secured facility." Eraserhead's sarcastic retort is undoubtedly rhetorical, but Izuku still feels a need to answer despite his reflexive flinch. "Okay, maybe it is what it looks like. But I'm not doing anything wrong." Spider-Man winces when he sees Eraserhead's skeptical stare. "I mean, I'm not here for any nefarious reasons." Izuku is not entirely sure why he shrugs while saying that second part, but he instantly regrets the nervous motion since it likely doesn't make him appear all that much more convincing. Eraserhead pulls a pair of golden goggles over his eyes. The slits where glass windows should be proving to be more of an intimidating feature. Spider-Man swallows a lump in his throat, nearly choking on whatever other excuses he had on the tip of his tongue. The underground hero takes a stance, stepping further into a fighting position. The lazy drawl is gone. The nonchalance from earlier is replaced by a stern statement as he says, "Right. That's why you cut the power to the building." Spider-Man stumbles, taken aback. What? Huh? He almost scratches the top of his head but is much too afraid to make any sudden movements that might trigger the underground hero to attack. The vigilante hadn't questioned why the room was so dark when he entered it. He had just assumed Yue wanted to save power and money by keeping the lights off. But if the power was cut, that wasn't me. Then that must mean he's not the only one breaking and entering Yue currently. Eraserhead catches on, noticing Spider-Man body language isn't aggressive. He keeps his stance but untenses his form. You're telling me that you weren't the one to blow the breaker. The underground takes a moment to contemplate. He starts considering what to do about one intruder while having to worry about the other. And that singular moment of hesitation is all that Spider-Man needs as an opportunity to make his grand escape. The vigilante bounds to the ceiling. Nope, I'm just the one blowing this popsicle stand. And begins running along it with his 2 feet rather than crawling on all fours. Hey, Eraserhead calls after the fleeing figure. Neither that short shout or the quick snap of his capture cloth manages to stop Spider-Man though. The vigilante evades getting his ankle snagged by the binding line with an acrobatic maneuver that simultaneously carries him over to the air duct in which he entered the room to begin with. Izuku breathed several sighs of relief through a series of adrenaline-high pants. Not only did he somehow manage to break into Yue, but he also somehow managed to outwit a pro hero. A combination of disbelieving panic and exhilarated excitement accelerates his heartbeat. Hand over hand, he crawls through the ventilation shaft as at brisk a pace as he can. He knows that security will try meeting him at the exit, so he needs to move fast. There's no time for celebration or complete and total relief just yet. He refuses to pat himself on the back, especially not when what he's doing is wrong. Izuku stops crawling. It was a wrong knee-jerk decision for him to sneak into Yue to begin with. And now that he's discovered he isn't the only one breaking and entering, he's using that as a distraction to run away. Izuku recalls the last time that he looked the other way when he could have done something to prevent a possible problem. He knows full well what it means to take responsibility for one's actions. Rather than continuing to crawl for the exit, Spider-Man makes a sharp turn and uses the ventilation system to terrain deeper into Yue. I know I'm gonna regret this. Izuku mumbles under his breath what he knows isn't true. His conscience would have regretted leaving Eraserhead alone much more. And so, the vigilante tunes out his thoughts in favor for the other tingling turnover at the back of his mind. Like he'd done with the spider tracers, Spider-Man follows his spider sense. Wherever danger is closest, the boy's special sense increases in terms of signaling him. He'd like to think of it as searching for the vibration of his silent cell phone in order to find it, but his spider sense can prove to be much more obnoxious than that. Seriously, Izuku knows he'll need some ibuprofen later at this rate. But then Izuku feels the kinetic energy traveling through the duct and understands that those vibrations in the air aren't only coming from his heightened senses. Spider-Man's gloved fingertips receive tiny zaps as he nears the end of this shaft's filter. In what must be another containment room for UAS exam bots is the source of that strange energy output. Spider-Man's eye lenses reflect a yellow hue that illuminates from the other person occupying the space. A suit the same shade of green as Izuku's hair beneath his mask conceals the person's body. Golden bands and similarly vibrant strands of lightning-etched embroidery crosses over that green in patterns that matches what radiates as an aura. Izuku knows his hero trivia, and he can confidently say this guy doesn't appear to be anyone other than a plausible villain. The supposed electrical villain turns his head when Spider-Man climbs into the room. Izuku can see now that UAS second intruder has a face mask designed to look like a starfish bursting into a static shock. He wants to crack a joke about it, but is at a loss for words over how dumb it is that he ultimately decides that it'd be too easy to make fun of. The electrical villain speaks first, Spider-Man, unintelligently unable to exclaim anything more than the identification of his surprise guest mate. Ah, there we go, finally a bad guy who understands the etiquette of these things. Izuku throws the villain a bone and decides to run with that as a positive stall tactic instead of going in all gung-ho. I show up, you shout my name in disbelief. Then comes the butt kicking, though not without a little action of extending his leg. It's you who will get their ass kicked. The villain defends himself with the electrical current covering his body. Spider-Man barely hoists his outstretched leg back up before it can get caught in the current. Vish! The vigilante flings himself down to where UAS robots are so that he has better cover to hide himself from any residual electrical attacks, whatever happened to etiquette. The villain tracks his newfound opponent's movement only for a moment, but then Spider-Man manages to disappear within the assembly line. If Izuku were the patient type, he'd continue stalling and wait for Eraserhead or some of the other pros to arrive before trying to get closer. But he's learned from his solo vigilante experience that it's sometimes up to oneself to try and resolve things. So he twists under the legs of a faux villain to slide up close and personal with his enemy. Spider-Man jets out with both of his legs this time. They connect with the villain's torso. Spider-Man feels the impact jarring up through his heels before he feels the defensive electrical shock barrier from the villain. First comes a crackle, which is then followed by a pop. Spider-Man's teeth rattle as he shouts, and he's blown back like he's just made contact with a bug zapper. The boy bounces 3 times, skipping harder than a stone tossed across a lake. Forget ibuprofen. He's gonna need something much better than that. But first, he needs to move. Spider-Man forces himself to turn over and bounds away from a streak of electricity. Had he been a fraction of a second slower, he'd likely be fried to a crisp right about now. His vision swims shallow while his mind swims deep. It becomes hard to think up a quip, just as hard as it is for him to dodge with his body still reeling from getting blasted so recently. The vigilante flips and falls away from a high-voltage beam. It's there that Spider-Man stumbles and lands on his backside. The shock to his system earlier is still reverberating throughout his body. He holds up his two hands, gesturing with a palm over fingers held vertically to form a T shape. It comes out a tad bit as a mumble, but Spider-Man manages to say, "Timeout." Timeout. The villain falters for a moment, but only a moment. After that brief lapse of confusion, he shakes his head clear of it and rekindles the energy brimming from his body. "There's no calling timeouts." "I'm afraid I have to agree with Electro," a third voice interjects from above. Both vigilante and villain pivot their heads in the direction of the voice to see it belongs to Eraserhead. The underground hero jumps down to land between them. There's no such thing as timeouts or fairness in a real fight. Electro pauses a second time, taking a step back when he sees that he's now outnumbered. "Oh, great, now there's two of you." The villain glances left and right in search of something. It could be a check for additional reinforcements to the heroes or himself, a search for an exit route, or anything else for that matter. To Spider-Man, it doesn't matter, he's just relieved to have backup. "Took you long enough to catch up." He forces himself to stand up beside Eraserhead. Now, having recovered both physically and mentally enough, he processes what's going on at a pace that would mean he's finally caught up. "Wait, Electro. This guy's name is Electro," which has him doing a double take. "What's wrong with the name Electro?" The villain sparks up with a flash of anger evident within the flash of electrical energy emitting from his form. Spider-Man shrugs, using that movement of his shoulders to rotate and stretch them. "It's not that much better than Eraserhead, I'll give you that." The vigilante jokingly gives his now temporary partner in crime fighting a quick glance. Eraserhead growls, not returning the eye contact. Or maybe he does. It's kinda hard to tell with the goggles. All that Spider-Man knows is that the underground hero isn't trying to arrest him anymore. So he takes that as a sign of good faith and strikes a pose beside the man's stance. The two form a truce and team up against Electro. The villain unleashes a blinding wave of amperage. Eraserhead instinctively shields his eyes with an arm, the light shining through the slits of his goggles more than enough to be blinding. Spider-Man squints, but the lens of his mask are a reflective glass that he fares a little better. The two part ways, ducking down in opposite directions to avoid getting caught in an electrical shockwave. Spider-Man veers under the belly of a robot, starting low. Velocity and voltage strike the machine, causing it to combust. Spider-Man uses that as momentum to carry himself high, going over the next robot in his way. Electricity surges underneath the springing spider being and destroys another hunk of metal. Eraserhead parkers on the opposite side of lined-up robots. He dodges short and long bursts of controlled currents with as much agility as Spider-Man, or he comes close to matching those acrobatic movements, at least. There's a few tricks that the underground hero isn't able to pull off and needs to compensate for. Eraserhead pushes off the leg of a robot for an extra boost to avoid getting electrocuted. Electro switches his aim from the two gymnasts to the ground. He uses the beams that he's able to produce from his palms as a means to launch himself up and away, which is what saves him from getting tangled up in either Eraserhead's capture cloth or Spider-Man's webbing. The villain cackles while landing atop one of the robots. It's on touchdown that he emits an electrical signal into the machine and all of the others. Spider-Man wishes Eraserhead's goggles could have been made as expressive as the lens on his mask when he reacts to the robots turning on and the underground hero doesn't. Electro is no longer the one who is outnumbered. The vigilante and his temporary partner have found themselves surrounded by mechanized faux villains engineered to put up a fight. Eraserhead locks onto Electro with a glare, the red glow passing through the slithers of his goggles indicating the activation of his quirk. "You're too late." But the villain boasts when the erasure quirk has no effect on shutting down the already activated robots. Good luck. Eraserhead grits his teeth to keep a frustrated grunt from becoming a shout as he's attacked by robots. The machines force him to look away from Electro in order to defend himself, which allows for Electro to flee and escape. Eraserhead snags a bot's leg with his capture cloth to pull himself away from another bot, but that simply propels him into a situation where 5 more corner him off. Eraserhead must admit his surprise when Spider-Man jumps in front of him to land a solid punch on one of the machines. The robot caves inward and goes crashing into one of its copies. Not only is that an impressive feat of strength, but the underground hero had expected the vigilante to follow Electro's example and use this as a distraction to run away. He gives Spider-Man a small nod to express appreciation for the save before moving to hit the shutdown switch on a bot behind him. "I always thought the robot uprising was going to be the vending machines. Not this." Spider-Man throws out a wisecrack while throwing out a faux villain's battery pack. He jumps onto another one's back where he punches a hole into it in order to rip out that machine's too. "Take this seriously," Eraserhead warns the vigilante to be cautious while performing defensive maneuvers of his own. "It's not UA controlling these. They aren't programmed for the entrance exam, so they could very well be out to kill us." As if on cue, a missile fired from one of the robot's back turrets comes rocketing towards them. Spider-Man snatches it mid-air with a web line in order to redirect it into another of the automations. An explosion ensues, heaps of burning scrap metal bombarding the surrounding area. You don't say. Spider-Man flips away from a second missile sent to do what the first couldn't. Eraserhead lassos what would be a one-pointer in the hero course exam with his capture cloth before using all of the strength he can muster as a means of winding it around to knock into its robotic brethren. The hunk of metal clumsily slams into its copies and they all crash into one giant pile. Eraserhead then uses that stack of steel as steps to carry himself into an overhead leap. After going airborne, the underground hero twists himself to land on a robot's back where he can hit its deactivation button. Spider-Man is in the midst of dispatching some of the other bots in their way when there comes a sudden shift to the environment. For a second, he thinks he's been electrocuted again or that a metal arm caught his skull. But he quickly realizes that it's his spider sense going off. The alarm pounds harder than any headache, slamming into his skull as though someone is banging a garbage can lid behind his head. Spider-Man spins around to see why. And he sees why. A robot, much bigger than all of the others, slowly lurches to life to join the others in their assault on him and Eraserhead. This one appears to be some type of excavation machine with tank tread tracks to wheel its massive mechanical body around. More robotical eyes than can be counted on a spider peer down at the vigilante and the underground hero. So, how many points is that one worth on the exam? Izuku gestures towards the massive automation like it's something Eraserhead could have somehow missed noticing. Eraserhead lifts his goggles up from his eyes to his forehead. He sees the colossal mechanism bearing down on them with no regard for its smaller compatriots, wheel belts crushing whatever gets in its way. Without tearing his gaze from it, he answers Spider-Man's question. Eraserhead says, 0. Izuku looks between the man's stoic and serious expression and the zero-pointer, dumbfounded. So this is what it means to try to get into UAS hero course. All the boy can mutter in response to the ridiculously high expectations of the school's students is, oh. Spider-Man flips backwards to gain distance on the incoming threat towards him and Eraserhead. He lands on a one-pointer where he applies all of his weight into that landing to bring it down. Across the way, Eraserhead uses his capture cloth as a grappling line to hoist himself towards the containment room's rafters. The underground hero secures himself there while looking for solutions from the newly acquired vantage point. Spider-Man bounds from bot to bot, still staying out of range from the massive mechanism's belt crusher. But as he does so, he stretches web lines from automation to automation. The connected bands begin to pull the crowd together until there's a significant pebble in the path of the giant machine. One that gets run over carelessly, which results in a sticky surface beneath its rotating tread track like gum on the bottom of a shoe. Yes, Spider-Man pumps both of his hands into the air as celebratory sky punches. But the celebration is premature. The tread track wins forward and rips the floor free with it rather than remaining stationary. Come on. The spider-themed vigilante springs away from the machine's footing before it can crush him. As he's falling back, the boy uses a web line to careen and carry himself to the rafters where Eraserhead resides. There, the underground hero has finished planting small charges to drop a few of those beams on the bot's head. If attacking from the bottom didn't work, then the man is hopeful that an assault from above might. It doesn't work. Though heavy enough to pin the two humans down should the beams have fallen on them, the rafter supports aren't near enough to do anything other than disturb the mechanical Goliath beneath them. In the words of Spider-Man, come on, seems appropriate, but Eraserhead only voices his disgruntlement with a low rough noise good enough to be a growl. Now what? Spider-Man makes an inquisitive shrugging gesture with his arms spread out. Communicating with his body language comes easy when he's hiding his expressions behind a mask. Eraserhead's face isn't fully covered though, and it takes on an expression of surprise that notifies Spider-Man of danger before the vigilante's spider sense even does. Move. The underground hero shouts a warning for them to dodge an incoming mechanical fist. Fortunately for Spider-Man, the giant metal arm isn't wielding a comically large newspaper to whack him with. He diverts his movement away from getting slammed and begins maneuvering through the rafters that still remain. Across the way, Eraserhead's jump turns into a dive that takes him down to ground level. The man isn't as nimble and young as the boy and takes damage on his legs when landing. Spider-Man hears a pain grunt, which causes him to look back. The eyes on his mask expand to cover his full face when he sees Eraserhead stuck in a compromised state directly in front of the zero-pointer's warpath. No, the vigilante redirects himself to go back into that same field of danger. Spider-Man's landing is with a little more grace when he puts himself between Eraserhead and the monstrous machine. What are you doing? Save yourself. Eraserhead strains to get up when he sees someone younger than him putting themselves in danger. But to no avail, the underground hero falls back, too injured to stand. Oh yeah, then who's gonna save you? Spider-Man is quick with a retort as always. The vigilante snakes an arm behind Eraserhead to lift and support the man's weight. The other arm extends to spin a web line. Except, no string comes out. The nozzle fizzles out the remnants of what's left in an otherwise empty web shooter. Oh no, not now. Spider-Man swiftly switches Eraserhead to his other arm, opting to try and spin a web from that shooter. But the second nozzle has the same effect. He's all out, and with the zero-pointer bearing down on them, Spider-Man is unable to replace the cartilages fast enough to swing him and Eraserhead to safety. He's left with one option. It's a desperate gamble, but Spider-Man is able to think quicker than he moves currently. Spider-Man plucks a cartilage from his spare supply. but instead of lodging it into one of his web shooters, he chucks it towards the zero-pointer's tread tracks. It's the same idea as his first attempt to stop the massive machine, just on a larger scale. The web cartilage combusts under the bot's belt and explodes with webbing. Goop covers the wheels and messes with the functionality until the movement loses out. Mere inches from getting rolled over, Spider-Man and Eraserhead stare straight ahead at what looks like a snow cushion collision. The vigilante releases a sigh of relief while simultaneously setting the underground hero back down. I'm glad that worked. Izuku can't imagine what it would have been like to get flattened. Judging by Eraserhead's hum of agreement, neither could he have. Your friend got away. The underground hero spares a tired glance in the direction that Electro fled before returning that tired stare back to Spider-Man. To which the vigilante indignantly throws his arms up in the air to argue, I told you that he's not my friend. Before backpedaling under the underground hero's gaze and more timidly answering, I guess I was just at the right place at the right time. Eraserhead huffs something shy of a laugh. Or the wrong place at the wrong time, but he otherwise displays no real amusement as he drags a calloused hand over his stubbled facial features. A moment later, he's waving that hand towards the room's ventilation as though he's shooing Spider-Man away. Go on and get out of here before I change my mind. He sees the vigilante about to speak and abruptly cuts the unlicensed hero off. This is only a one-time offer. I won't ask what you were doing here, but it's clear from your actions that you're telling the truth when you say you wanted to help. So go. Now, Spider-Man stalls, but only for a second. With a murmured, thanks, he bids an appreciative farewell. Eraserhead watches with fascination as the boy leaves using an abnormal agility to move. The door opens with a pop, one loud enough to inspire onomatopoeia and make Izuku believe the noise is coming from his back for a moment. It's a sound also loud enough to be heard by the boy's mother. Inko arrives to greet her son at the household entrance as he kicks his signature red sneakers off. She doesn't see him wipe his brow with his web-patterned mask like it's a handkerchief or the way he sneakily hides it in his coat jacket, which is already suspicious enough for him to be wearing all the way zipped up during such a sweltering summer, but she does note the way he's hunched over with a sour expression. Inko tenderly treads towards him with outstretched hands. She hesitates to hug or console him, still cautious and careful because of the place they left off earlier. The walk didn't help, so the anxious mother settles on wringing those two hands together, praying for him to not be as still sad or angry as he appears. Izuku falters, seemingly startled by his mom and her question. She senses that he must have been deep in thought and waits for his mind to buffer. When it does, because Mama Midoriya's motherly instinct is always right, her son offers a somber smile to placate her concern. Not the way that I thought it would. Oh, Izuku. Inko's heart clenches as tightly as she squeezes her hands together. She really doesn't want to say it, her mouth opening and shutting, but she eventually convinces herself to speak. She tells him, I gave it some thought while you were gone and, sweetie, you can try for the hero course if you want. No, Izuku's curt cutoff renders Inko speechless. So he continues talking instead of her, you were right, Mom. My ego got too big and I was going to make some poor decisions regarding UA. I'll just stick with Gen Ed. Inko blinks, but is unable to blink back her disbelief nor the tears starting to seep out of her sockets. But I don't understand. You seem so sure. She means to ask him what about his walk could have possibly changed his mind but is much too moved to do so. Izuku swallows, choking down his own tears before they can join his mother's. I just realized you were right is all. His shoulders give a small shrug. There's no use trying for something that'll just wind up being a big waste of time. Inko can hear the hurt in her son's voice to know that he hasn't fully let his dream go, and so she finally gives in to her need to hold him. But she doesn't try rekindling his passion to alleviate that hurt. I just don't want to see you in danger is all. She can't bring herself to take that chance when he's quirkless and has no power to defend himself. Izuku stiffens in her hold, eyes going wide. Inko worries that she said something wrong again, until his body loosens and he leans into hers. Slowly, Izuku's eyes slide shut and he returns her hug. He rests his chin atop her head as he whispers, I know, Mom. When they finally break apart and end the embrace, Inko forces out a laugh to clear her throat. I won't have to worry about that with you being in Gen Ed though. No villains and no potential explosions that you could get from being in support either. It's a poor attempt at humor, but Izuku fakes a chuckle to avoid making the moment any more awkward. Yeah. He mumbles something else under his breath, but Inko is walking out of earshot as he does. She likely expects him to follow, so he raises his voice after that to call out and let her know, I'm gonna head to my room for a bit. All right, that's fine. Just be back down for dinner. She shouts back from the other end of the house a second later. Izuku sighs. He didn't tell his mom the real reason that he changed his mind. After all, how could he? That'd be like telling her that he's Spider-Man. After the mess that he got mixed up in, he feels too responsible for the mishap at UA to show his face at the entrance exam. Not to mention the way Eraserhead and the rest of the school's staff must feel about him now, even if they did let him go. Izuku toys with the zipper at the top of his jacket, thumbing the metal pull tab. He has a secret identity to keep as a vigilante now more than ever. It's not like he can go using his powers at the exam to pass it without exposing himself. Slowly and ever so slightly, Izuku pulls the zipper down. Just by a bit. Just enough that the top part of his Spider-Man suit is exposed, right where the emblem resides. He's able to do what he always wanted without passing the hero course, which is helping people and saving lives. That's what the alter ego is all about. That's what Spider-Man is for. And as for Izuku Midoriya, he pulls out his mask, the reflective lens on it staring into his eyes. He can do some good too. He has a responsibility to his mother, a responsibility to his studies, a responsibility to those in his life that he doesn't get them tangled up in Spider-Man's web. Izuku shoves the mask back into his pocket and pulls the zipper on his coat back up. What he did, thinking that it was for Itsuka, was wrong. Even if it was some small part for her, he broke into UA for himself and his own selfish reasons. She blocked him because of his responsibility as Spider-Man, and he almost gave up that responsibility trying to win her back. He hangs his head, thinking that his father would probably be disappointed in him. He can't compromise himself in doing the right thing for anyone, not even cute girls. He thinks of that blonde girl that cut him across his chest, especially not the crazy ones either, no matter how attractive that craziness can be at times. Spider-Man really is just a kid. He thinks like a kid, acts like a kid. Eraserhead ceases his pacing back and forth to whirl on Tsukachi and give the detective a hard stare. He talks like a kid. There's a hard tone to go along with that stare too, which makes Tsukachi hold up his hands in a placating gesture. Okay, just calm down. We expect it as such that getting a confirmation shouldn't rile us up. Tsukachi takes a second to let that suggestion hang in the air, hoping that it'll settle. It does, as much as it will when it comes to quelling Eraserhead's attitude, at least. The underground hero heaves a heavy sigh up and out of his mouth. He wouldn't stop talking. In all my years of teaching, not even any of my students come close to being as unserious as he was. The man continues his complainative critique with his hands on his hips, but only lagging for a second with contemplation to correct himself. What he did was still somehow effective nevertheless. Tsukachi raises a brow at that. Receiving any sort of praise from Eraserhead is uncommon, even if it's tacked on with criticism. Luck. He presumes that he must be mistaken. But the underground hero shakes his head, denying that Spider-Man got this far as a vigilante solely on luck. It was more than that. Eraserhead thinks back to what he saw. It was more like an ingrained instinct or a third sense keeping him alive. What would have been otherwise reckless was turned into innovation. Interesting. The detective makes a mental note of what could be a quirk effect or something else to follow as a lead in the investigation. Then asks, anything else you noticed? Eraserhead nods, still giving credit where credit is due. His webbing isn't organic. That bit of news surprises Tsukachi. He's also smart enough to build himself support items. Or perhaps he's getting them from a supplier. But the detective isn't so shocked that he can't rationalize that information. He stops the underground hero from jumping to any sort of conclusions. It's not implausible to rule out that Spider-Man isn't working alone. Eraserhead crosses his arms, not following that same line of thinking. He didn't seem the type. The underground hero recalls the way that Spider-Man utilized the cartilages to stop the zero-pointer. I can tell that he knew what he was doing by the way that he handled his gear. Not even pros familiarize themselves enough with their items to be that comfortable with them. That only comes with knowing the insides and outs as an inventor. So then we're dealing with a boy genius who's abnormally aware of his surroundings. Tsukachi chews on his bottom lip to bite down on a bitter laugh that should make catching him all the easier. He's unable to keep the sarcasm from coming out though. Eraserhead hums instead of agreeing, which makes him sound like he's hiding something. It's no secret that the man has a soft spot for both vigilantes and kids, that the detective can come up with a few theories as to what. But before Tsukachi can ask about it, the underground hero is already moving on. Since this incident happened on the grounds of UA, I'm sure that Nezu is going to want to get his grubby paws on this too. So don't worry about cracking the case too much. He refers to the hero school's principal like he's referring to vermin before settling into the seat opposite to Tsukachi's desk. Tsukachi sits down too, nodding along. He's already emailed me with a formal request for copies of the Spider-Man investigation. The truth is that the detective has been blatantly ignoring that request, and he knows he's safe in sharing such information with someone who understands exactly as to why he would. That rat bastard likely already has his own case file built that he won't bother sharing with me or the rest of the precinct anyways. Eraserhead hides his small smile of amusement within the crook of his capture cloth that doubles as a scarf. In doing so, he feels the brim of his goggles brush against the bristles under his chin. They remind him of something else that he can share with the detective. Speaking of which, you might want to boot up your computer or get a pen out, whichever is faster. He mimes jotting down notes so that the detective gets the message, and Tsukachi does just that. You mean to tell me that there's more? Tsukachi steels himself with a glance up at the underground hero. The tip of his pen presses into a blank page of his notepad, ink seeping into the paper already. Eraserhead slides his goggles up over his head and sets them down on the desk between he and the detective. I tried using my quirk during our encounter. There's an intake of breath between both of the investigators that leaves what comes next lingering in the air before it can even be said. Erasure doesn't work on Spider-Man. You might want to consider altering the type of quirk suspects on your list. Pink petals flutter about with applicants, covering the grounds that are overlooked by cherry blossom trees. A vast expanse of leveled stone sidewalk leads into the prestigious place the way a red carpet may get rolled out for guests to a major event. There are even camera flashes to enhance that environmental effect, several people snapping memorabilia photos at the widespread entry gates. Izuku gazes up at the arch of it as he walks under what's suspended overhead. He half expects torches to be on either side the way that American film Jurassic Park had its entry gate. Despite having broken into UA prior to now, it's all awe-inspiring new ground to tread. It's a stark contrast between cramped vent shafts and assembly warehouses. The boy's eyes marvel at what's ahead of him. Built atop a forested hill resides the Hero School Student Center. There are enough floors stacking the suspension of the facility that it could be a skyscraper. Glass panes radiate the sun on the horizon, only dimming where a connector bridge attaches the center with a second tower. From this far back, the architecture appears to deliberately mimic the letter H, undoubtedly standing for hero if it is anything intentional. That's just one of the many impressive structures surrounding the campus as Izuku follows the flow of applicant traffic. Acres of land stretch beyond what the eye can see. Anxiety, excitement, eagerness, and many other emotions swell within the youth. Izuku is so caught up in his fanboy fascination of it all that he winds up misstepping. A pebble in his path catches the front of his foot, causing him to trip over himself. Naturally, Izuku's spider sense warns him of the accident. His instinct is to catch himself so that he doesn't fall and scrape his knees or elbows. He's about to obey that bodily impulse. But on the way down, he can see the prying eyes of those around him. With an active audience watching, he can't boast his powers without risking exposure of his double life in vigilantism. Izuku fights his instinct, allowing gravity to take him instead of stopping it. Except, midway through his descent, there's suddenly no gravity left at all. Izuku starts to levitate above the ground. The boy frantically flails his arms, grasping at air as he reaches for the surface beneath him. He knows that if he can just touch the floor that he'll be able to stick and keep himself from floating away. Secret identity be damned now. He decides that he is not going to drift off into space before he even gets a chance to try out for UAS Gen Ed department. Whoa, no need to freak out, I've gotcha. A bubbly voice breaks through Izuku's panic and he realizes that he's just bobbing about in one place rather than soaring into the sky. It all makes sense to him what spared him a tumble when a brunette girl explains, "It's just my quirk," her hands pressing together with a whispered release being what returns gravity to him. He breathes a sigh of relief, meaning to say thanks with it, but all the wind apparently leaving him and that sigh making it rather difficult. Izuku tries again. A wheeze comes out. Well, now this cute girl is only going to think he's weirder than she probably already does. The fact that she's cute doesn't help with his spiking anxiety either, by the way. If not for it being the tail end of a sweltering summer and his raging teenage hormones, he'd also like to imagine he wouldn't be so sweaty right now. The girl scratches the back of her head, starting to feel awkward about the interaction too. You look super nervous. Sorry if I startled or bothered you, I just didn't think it'd be good to trip right before your exam. Bad luck and all. She waves over her shoulder while walking with the other candidates. Well, anyway, we don't want to be late either. Good luck on your exam. Izuku raises his hand to wave back to her, the shaky appendage giving her a thumbs up that she can't even see from behind. It feels like going for a fist bump when the other person wanted a high five, especially when he keeps the gesture poised for way too long after the matter of her having left a while ago. But he still beams with some pride anyways. After all, he did just talk to a girl. Well, he didn't actually do any speaking, but that's a lot easier to do when wearing a mask so he has some anonymity to hide his embarrassment, which he doesn't have now. And Itsuka was a special case, their meeting behind a dumpster much less romantic than UA. Whatever. The point is that he technically talked to a girl, and that's a good omen to balance out the tripping as a bad one. Having recovered well enough, Izuku puts one foot forward and takes another step to replace the one that he screwed up, which promptly leads him into a person's back. Oop, sorry. He staggers a bit to put some space between himself and the other UA applicant, only to see when the person turns around that it's somebody he recognizes. How his spider sense didn't warn him of his childhood friend turned bully is beyond him. Katsuki Bakugo whirls around to glower at the person that dares brush shoulders with him. His spark of anger only kindling into a more burning fire of fury when he too recognizes who bumped into him, Deku. The boy's ashen blonde hair bristles like pines on a porcupine. Hey Kaken, Izuku reflexively recluses from his irritable neighbor. Past experience has proven that getting too close can result in some burns, which sucks when they practically live right next door to one another. What the fuck are you doing here? Katsuki closes the gap between he and Izuku. The angry blonde's hand grabs a clumpful of the other boy's shirt, the blonde's quirk singing the material as it dares to detonate. Are you trying to apply to be a hero when I distinctly remember telling you to back off and not even bother? Spit flings itself at Izuku as the other boy barks at him like a Pomeranian. And no, I'm not. Izuku holds his hands up while wildly waving them to display himself as submissive and not willing to fight. They've gained themselves a few onlookers. Izuku tries laughing it off to de-escalate the situation, playing up his act so that the spectators will go back to their business. UA has general studies too. He explains himself to the bully as best as he can. I wouldn't even dream of trying out for the hero course. Katsuki bares his teeth, his resemblance to a Pomeranian now looking like one prepared to bite. But he too takes notice of the passerbyers, and not even he is willing to start a problem in public that might hurt his chances at getting into UA. TCH, he releases Izuku's shirt, but not without a shove, and lets Izuku go free, so long as you know your place. Izuku deflates with his second sigh of the day. He expected UA to be an eventful place, but this is unbelievably unprecedented luck. The kid who rearranged his name's kanji to mean useless and got all the other children at his school growing up to call him Deku just so happens to run into him amongst all these other examinees. What are the odds? But it is a firm reminder that he must maintain his unassuming appearance if he's to survive. He was only treated that way because of his quirkless nature, the switch up from his friend coming after that diagnosis. And so long as Spider-Man is a secret, it'll have to stay that way. Izuku gets back on track, following the flow of examinees towards the exam center. They start splitting at a fork in the path, various trails leading to different exam halls. It's not so hard to know which one is for the support department, lots of those candidates carrying heavy machinery with them. As for which path is the correct one to follow for Gen Ed, that's a little tougher to figure out. Izuku slowly walks closer to the buildings where people file into separate auditoriums, hoping it might get easier to know who goes where from there. While browsing the exam halls, he becomes distracted by a familiar tingling sensation in the back of his mind. Izuku's face twitches and then scrunches up in confusion. Why his spider sense would be ringing here of all places is a strange occurrence. So, he turns around and tries to find the source of its cause. Some scanning of the potentially future students takes his eyes to a blonde boy with a black lightning streak dyed into his hair. He's on the phone, appearing nervous while talking to whoever is on the other end. But the guy is heading for the hero course, so he can't be all that bad. Izuku looks around some more. He gasps. Who he spots next also sees him. Itsuka Kendo stares from across the way, people putting them apart, but the two making direct eye contact nevertheless. She seems surprised to see him too for a second before frowning and joining her group and loading into the auditorium she belongs to. Izuku shudders, believing his spider sense to have warned him about the girl's animosity from what she thinks is him ghosting her. That's not how he hoped to see her again, especially that she'd make his danger sense go off. Little does he know, that's not the case at all. He had been right the first time when taking notice of the hero course applicant beside Itsuka. The boy with a lightning streak design in his mess of electric blonde hair tugs at the collar around his neck. He's holding a burner phone close to his ear while listening to the modulated voice on the other end of it. The mysterious caller that he's in contact with gives him a command: pass that exam and do your job as our spy, Electro, or it's lights out for you. The unmasked villain who opposed Eraserhead and Spider-Man clutches the phone tighter in his hand while pressing it closer to his ear. Yes, Sensei, the boy's name tag reads Denki Kaminari, and he's the one that sabotaged the exam bot so that he can pass the exam. Chapter 6, Just Another Day in the Life. Izuku finishes the exam early. When he hands in a sheet of filled-out answer bubbles, he's among only a few others that have done the same before the end of the exam period. And since he's only applying for general education, there's no practical portion for him to provide any physical demonstration of talent. Which means that he's free to head home and wait for his results to get mailed to his house address. He takes the long route off campus, hoping to spot a pro hero or two before he leaves. The walk also allows him an opportunity to see some more of the establishment. While he doesn't run into any heroes doubling as teachers, he does manage to find a canteen corner near the Gen Ed auditorium. A variety of vending machines are available to choose from. Off to one side, there's some other fellow who finished their exam early. Izuku sees that they're buying from the canned coffee selection. Feeling like he could go for a bit of caffeine himself, Izuku decides to strike up a conversation. Hello, he announces himself before approaching as to not startle the stranger. Half-lidded eyes glance Izuku's way. Upon getting closer to the person, Izuku sees that there's much more to their dreary demeanor than just their eyes. Hair as unruly as his own stands on end, an indigo bush of bedhead making the dude appear taller. Izuku suddenly understands why this guy came here to get himself some coffee. The vending machine spits one out for the sleepy stranger to take. The can lid cracks open and he takes a slow sip. Despite not having his greeting returned, Izuku continues talking to the guy. Do you think you did well on the exam? He figures it's only natural and polite, especially since they have to pass each other by in close proximity to switch spots at the vending machine, and it'd only make for an awkward exchange if he didn't say something. There's an uncomfortable pause anyways. Izuku thinks for a moment that he'd have better luck talking to a wall and hoping for it to respond. But then he sees that the person appears to be considering something. Despite that contemplative look, the stranger answers, "Don't care." Really? Izuku reacts with genuine surprise. It's beyond him who'd go through the trouble of applying to a school without an actual care, much less a place as prestigious as UA. But then he reconsiders and thinks that it's possible this person is applying to more than one department. What kind of placement were you hoping for? He lets his curiosity carry the conversation further along while choosing his own canned coffee from the vending machine. The indigo insomniac makes an expression that knits his brows together. An already skewered stare shrinks even further. What do you care? Izuku hears some agitation in the tone of that question. It's accompanied by a pop from the boy's beverage when pressure is put on the grip of the can. Believing that he could be dealing with a potential secondary kaken, Izuku dials it back a bit. I don't mean to pry. He uses his signature submission method of displaying his hands as a sign of surrender. I was just wondering if we might get put in the same class or not. He lets a nervous laugh escape, hoping that the possible aggressor will laugh it off too. Fortunately, some of that tactic must have worked, because there's a visible release of tension in the fellow UA applicant's shoulders. But there isn't a complete loss of attitude, not judging by the snippiness to the stranger's next sentence. It takes a lot of pride to automatically assume you're already in the hero course, he says it with a sneer. Izuku's emerald eyes widen at that. Realizing that there's clearly been a misunderstanding, he begins waving his hands around in an exaggerated effort to clear it up. Oh, you thought? No, I only applied for Gen Ed. He starts laughing again while nervously rubbing the nape of his neck. I'm not exactly hero course material by society's standards. The Indigo Insomniac's slitted stare parts enough to be considered wide too before blinking. It's as close to a surprised expression that the stoic poker face allows. You're not. But his humbled hesitance in what to say next gives away a lot. Sorry. I didn't realize. No need to apologize. You had no way of knowing. Izuku continues to laugh and wave it off. When he sees that the other boy isn't laughing along, he sobers himself with a couple of feigned coughs to make it seem like he's clearing his throat. Izuku pauses before trying to pick up from where they left off. So, I take it that you applied for the hero course then. That standoffish demeanor remains in the stranger, even when he twists on his heel to walk away. No, his answer comes as he turns his back to Izuku. Which of those two things is more surprising to Izuku is a tough competition. The shell-shocked spiderling soaks it in while grabbing his canned coffee from the vending machine. Once his mind catches up to his body, he realizes that he's standing there all alone now. Oh, Izuku stammers out a quick response while stumbling forward to catch up with his acquaintance. So, what did you apply for? He speaks up just enough to be heard from behind the other boy. The stranger side-eyes his pursuer until they're walking next to each other. After a moment, those eyes roll dramatically and the boy answers, same as you, albeit with a less than enthused sigh, general education. I see. Izuku nods along while mulling over that fresh bit of information about the purple-headed puzzle. Pieces of that puzzle snap together in his mind. Pretty soon, he's come to a conclusion. If you're like me, you must have originally wanted to try for the hero course instead then. The sleepy stranger sobers up enough to shoot Izuku a serious stare. We're nothing alike. His voice growls into his coffee can before he takes a long swig from it. Izuku recluses after that, realizing that he may have made a mistake in being so presumptuous. Embarrassed, the boy diverts his gaze and takes a sip from his own beverage to go. Yeah, probably not. He drags his feet with a downtrodden mien. The other boy's feet stop completely, other than turning to face Izuku. So why do you keep following me? He glares as he gives Izuku an accusatory attitude. Izuku jumps, startled by the sudden stop that was immediately followed by an interrogative advancement. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just that, well, the exit is in this direction, so. He fidgets while trying to come up with a logical explanation to cover for something as stupidly simple as trying to make small talk and become friends. The peeved purple-headed person continues to stare down Izuku a while longer before eventually accepting that answer. TCH. He steps back and then begins heading for the building's exit. Fine. Izuku takes that as a sign that he can at least follow the other boy off the premises, so he hurries to catch up. It becomes a bit of an awkward walk when the two of them don't say anything more to one another, the silence only broken up by periodic sips from their drinks, but it's better than arguing at least. Until, the uncomfortability becomes a bit much even for the one who caused it to be that way. The bedhead boy begrudgingly clears his throat before awkwardly asking, when you said you don't meet society's standards. What did you mean by that? Izuku stares at the indigo-haired fellow, surprised by his inquisitiveness. He stops and swallows. He hadn't expected to talk about it and reveal this about himself, but he figures it won't change anything if the stranger already dislikes him. I'm quirkless. It's weird to say that now that he has spider-like abilities, but it may as well be true still. At least, as far as the public's perception of Izuku Midoriya is concerned, he is still quirkless. He has a mirthless smile on his face to go along with his bitter laugh. Not exactly hero course material, right? The irony of him not being up to society's standards is kind of funny though. Izuku isn't sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that he's the only one laughing right now, so he doesn't look at his acquaintance. He can't bring himself to do that. He looks ahead instead, and is relieved to see that they've reached UAS frontal barrier. We're at the exit gate. Well, guess this is where we part ways. He turns to leave, throwing a wave goodbye over his shoulder as he does. Where are you headed? Train station is this way, but finds himself shocked still rather than continuing to leave. He whirls himself around to look at the boy he was walking with, as if that will help him to make sure that he heard that correctly. The stranger's stoic stare is still there, but there's a notable softness to it now. Izuku realizes that the guy has lowered his guard somewhat. Green curls fall to one side when Izuku tilts his head. Looking at the stranger from another angle doesn't help him to understand either. He momentarily believes it must be pity or something along the lines of that, but he's seen what that looks like from people before and this doesn't quite fit that category. Seeing Izuku's delay, the other boy raises both his eyebrows. He casually points behind himself in the direction that he's going in. You did come by train, right? And that makes some sense to Izuku. All right. He figures that it's nothing to do with anything other than what would be expected of their situation and decides to stop overthinking it. Thank you. Izuku internally laughs now. From what he knows about this boy's behavior, he bets all of what he said to him went in one ear and out the other. Even someone who's quiet or reserved would gasp or shout when hearing he's quirkless. The fact that he got no such reaction means what he said fell upon deaf ears most probably. Izuku feels slightly relieved at that. It's hard enough being judged as Spider-Man when he's trying to do everything right that he doesn't need judgment imparted onto Izuku Midoriya again. You were right, a short sentence from the stoic stranger stabs straight through Izuku's thoughts. Izuku does a double take. The Indigo Insomniac gives his fellow UA applicant a brief glance before elaborating, I did want to try for the hero course. Izuku is wondering why this is getting brought up or where it's going, listening intently. But I couldn't because of my quirk. He has to withhold a gasp when he realizes that the acquaintance was listening to him about his quirklessness after all, and that's what this is about. It was a bad matchup. I found out that the exam has robots, so I doubt I would have been able to pass. Sensing that what was shared is due to some small relatability in their experiences, Izuku can't let that sit or slide for more than 2 seconds. He could have still tried though. He offers some encouragement with a strained smile to boot. But the other boy shakes his head. Nah, I don't think anybody would have appreciated me using their quirk on them because I couldn't on robots. The corners of his lips tug in no particular direction, fighting to lift into a mirthless smile or fall into a frown, but neither expression winning. Izuku misses a step, nearly tripping over himself. He realizes that he doesn't know what this guy's quirk is. Part of him wonders if he had just assumed the person was also quirkless. What's your quirk? His gaze is immediately met with a glare. He recoils. The other boy appears to regret that, loosening his steely stare. But Izuku can tell that he overstepped. You don't have to tell me if you don't want. Did you get bullied growing up because you're quirkless? That question is personal enough that Izuku can understand the point of it being asked after asking one of his own over-the-boundary types of questions. He knows he should leave it at that. He should just stay silent and let the other boy know that he understands he crossed a line. But another part of him feels inclined to answer. Izuku starts to say yes, but suddenly he loses all of his cognitive function, followed by the paralyzation of his body when those brain functions return. Despite his eyes being glazed over, they still see clearly that he's been frozen in animation. A numbness relaxes his muscles to the point where he can no longer feel them. For a second, he thinks he's fallen asleep. But that can't be the case since he's still standing. It should scare him to feel so disconnected from himself, but his spider sense doesn't register whatever is happening as a threat currently, so he just keeps trying to analyze it as an experience rather than escape it. Which doesn't last long, because his escape comes promptly with a release and relinquishment of whatever control harbored him. My quirk is called brainwashing. The hero course wannabe explains what happened with a remorseful and shameful shrug. It does exactly what its name implies. Izuku understands why such a quirk wouldn't prove effective against robots. But he's still overwhelmed by what that kind of power can do. That's amazing. His urge to perform quirk analysis has him materializing a journal out of thin air to write in with a pen that seemingly also teleported into his hands. The brainwashing boy takes a step back, flabbergasted by both that incredible ability to make pen and paper appear and, more importantly, that unusual reaction to his quirk. He's used to people ridiculing him and calling him a villain or evil because of his ability to take away their body's free will. He's certainly not used to anyone praising his power in any sort of way. He's pretty sure nobody has ever called it amazing. He stares, open-mouthed and wide-eyed. You should totally resubmit yourself for the hero course. You'd be so good at rescue, or hostage situations. And it'd only be even better if you can control more than one person at a time. Izuku loses himself in his hyper-fascination of quirks as he tends to do. And while some of those ramblings may have gotten lost in translation to the owner of that quirk, they are all kind words that tug at his heartstrings. Izuku stops spewing stuff out of his mouth about how cool the power is when he sees the boy's poker face has been broken and there are now tears bordering his tired eyes. Oh, I'm sorry, I probably got a bit carried away. No, the brainwasher stops Izuku from apologizing. He allows a small smile to appear on his face as he dries his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. Thank you. Nobody has ever said any of that to me before. He bows ever so slightly to express his gratitude. Why, you don't need to thank me. Izuku scratches the top of his head as he tries to pull a more coherent thought out of it to quell his nerves. He's not really sure what to say or do in situations such as this, and it's quickly starting to become awkward again. And then he's struck by a sudden realization. I never got your name. There's a bit of hesitation from the acquaintance before he finally formally introduces himself, Hitoshi Shinso, which is followed by the question, and yours? Izuku Midoriya. The broccoli-headed boy straightens and smiles as he returns the favor. It's nice to meet you, Shinso. Shinso raises an eyebrow, appearing skeptical. Midoriya, really? His drawl is full of just as much incredulity. Izuku blinks, confused as to why someone would doubt his name is legit. But when he follows Shinso's eyeline and realizes that the boy is staring at his green hair, he understands. Oh, that's just a coincidence. He laughs since it does happen to be such his type of luck in life. If Shinso believes him or continues to doubt it, he doesn't bother pushing the matter further. He simply brushes the topic of conversation off with a wave, which then becomes a gesture for them to get a move on. Come on, we've got a train to catch, he urges for Izuku to pick up the pace. Izuku follows along, impressed by the other boy's sense of direction. Do you take the train often? He figures that must be the case for Shinso to have such a familiarity with the process. Shinso shrugs, I guess, not really elaborating enough to give Izuku a real answer. But that's fine since they're already boarding one of the train cars and there's not much room for conversation when getting crammed into what's essentially a sardine can of people. They don't get a seat, those are already occupied. So Shinso holds onto a roof strap to brace himself while Izuku grabs the car's support pole. Even with something to keep themselves sturdy, they along with everyone else lurch a little when the train gets its sluggish start. It's muffled by their enclosed carrier, but what comes next is the clashing of steel wheels against railway tracks. And then the car rocks side to side while being pushed along. After a while, Izuku moves closer to Shinso so that he can whisper with him for the rest of the ride's duration. He goes back to the original root of their conversation and asks, why don't you try applying for a different hero school? Shinso gives Izuku a look that makes the boy feel inclined to explain why he's asking that. I mean, if you don't care about going into Gen Ed, then why bother applying at all? Dude, it's UA, Shinso says that like it's an obvious enough answer. Which, to Izuku, it may as well be. Izuku nods, understanding completely. But even so, Shinso continues to explain himself and his reasoning behind going for Gen Ed. Plus, I heard that it's possible for students to prove themselves during the sports festival so that there's a shot at getting transferred to the hero course. Izuku's eyes widen at that news. It's a first for him. He had absolutely no idea that was possible. Really? His all leaks out through his mouth before he can stop himself from saying anything aloud about it. Shinso nods, reaffirming his statement. Only general education students are able to do it, apparently. So that's what I thought I would try to do. He grips the ceiling strap above him a little tighter as he adds, it's my last shot at getting in that I don't want anyone sabotaging me. Izuku understands the implications of that last part. It must have been why Shinso started out so suspicious and aggressive towards him. I won't tell a soul about it. Izuku crosses his heart with his pinky finger before holding it out towards Shinso. As a matter of fact, I want to support you in your dream. Shinso stares at the outstretched pinky. Albeit apprehensively, he performs the pinky promise ritual. Afterwards, Shinso scoffs. You trying to live vicariously through me? He eyes Izuku up and down with what might still be some distrust. Izuku chuckles, admittedly not able to deny nor confirm that possibility. Maybe so. He answers honestly, but what hope does a quirkless kid have compared to you? Shinso falters at that. A beat later, he hums in agreement. Izuku worries that he might have soured the moment by bringing up his quirklessness, but his concern gets alleviated when Shinso asks, so how exactly are you going to help me then? Izuku smiles as he fishes out his quirk analysis journal from the back of his pants. Already, the otaku is mulling over ideas in his mind of how Shinso's brainwashing can be used as a hero. Thoughts of how they can train his talent to prepare for the sports festival share that headspace. Like he did when preparing himself to become Spider-Man, he even considers making some sort of support device. Izuku clicks his pen to begin writing notes. I'm glad you asked. Suddenly, something screeches throughout the train cabin, interrupting Izuku. It sounds similar to the brakes being hit, but that can't be the case since they're still going. Izuku covers his ears along with everyone else, hands clasped around either side of his head when he drops his journal and pen. Through squinted eyes, he sees the source of the shrill squall. It's the announcement speaker system reverberating some kind of feedback. Thankfully, whatever connectivity problems were causing that issue gets resolved. Unthankfully, that means the next thing everyone on the train hears is an announcement that isn't from the conductor. The voice they hear is just as high-pitched and it belongs to Screwball is live. A villain that Izuku is familiar with announces her takeover of the train. Consider yourselves lucky because, thanks to yours truly, you'll all be going for a joyride today. Already, the hijacking has caused passengers to panic. A full swing of murmurings that are coupled with shouts makes it hard to hear whatever else Screwball has to say. Whatever her announcement, it can't be good since the train notably begins picking up speed per her proclamation. Izuku subtly shifts closer to one of the train's windows. From there, he can peer outside onto the tracks and gauge the speed override more practically. Everything zooms by, blurring together. They're definitely going faster than they're supposed to, and he imagines Screwball has no plans on stopping them anytime soon. To make matters worse, the villain sounds euphoric about it all, and joining me for a special guest appearance is none other than the most gentlemanly criminal of all. She introduces a partner in her crime when the rustling of a microphone being passed over diminishes. Quite the introduction from our lovely host. Though this particular type of content isn't my usual forte, I must say that I am quite honored to be doing this collab. A man's voice, much more even and refined by Screwball's contrasting enthusiasm, takes the wheel. Izuku fears that the transfer of control isn't just figuratively but also quite literal. We pay attention to what you enjoy watching, dear viewers, and there was a noticeable spike in viewership with Screwball's most recent stream. After putting our heads together, we thought it best to raise the stakes, and what better way to one-up a plane's nosedive than a train wreck? Yes, let's cause a train wreck in this lowly society built around heroes. The gentlemanly voice suddenly gains some energy as he begins performing for everybody that's listening. did you know that this railway was founded and built to transport civilians in critical condition during hero battles? That's why the system collectively runs around Misutafu Hospital. But obviously there's been a change in the train's usage over the years. Yes, I dare say its originally intended purpose has gone off the rails. Screwball's guest star breaks out into hysterics, along with Screwball herself giggling up a storm. Izuku shares a look with Shinso, each of them sharing the same dread. Izuku grips the hemming of his shirt. Underneath his casual clothing is his superhero spandex. It's not like he can make a subtle change with all of these people surrounding him though. If he does, then his secret is out. But if he doesn't, he might not be alive much longer to have a secret. It's a dire situation and the stakes are high that he can't just idly wait for a pro hero to come and save the day. This calls for the vigilante Spider-Man to appear on the scene. So, Izuku balls up the bottom of his shirt even more and begins to slowly raise it up. He prepares to face the consequences of exposing himself because he has the power to help and it's his responsibility to use that power. Izuku pauses, seeing something up ahead through one of the passenger windows that grants him a miracle. It's a tunnel. When they go through it, the car will be barely lit. He'll have just long enough to switch into his Spider-Man persona before anybody can see him do it. Izuku thanks God above for saving his butt. Not even Shinso, who's right beside him, will get a glimpse within the darkness. And so that's exactly what Izuku does. He waits until the train enters the tunnel. As soon as the car gets blacked out, he pulls his shirt off to unveil the spider emblem centered in the web pattern of his suit's top. Then, just for caution's sake, he pulls on his mask next, which is followed by his web shooters and gloves. Lastly, off comes his pants and shoes. He falters, realizing he has to hide his top layer of clothing somewhere. With time running out, the train about to come out of the tunnel at any given moment, he tucks his clothes under his seat. Spider-Man hops to the ceiling right as sunlight recolors the car's cabin. All of those murmurings from earlier return full swing at their loudest decibel, everybody surprised to see the vigilante sharing space with them. Not wanting to cause a panic or for any of them to get the wrong idea, Spider-Man quickly thinks of a joke to lighten the mood. Somebody here doesn't have their boarding pass, and I don't think it's just me. He turns to address the car's announcing system so that Screwball and her partner in crime get the message too. Spider-Man. Synchronized shouts from the pair of villainous streamers confirm that they can hear or see the vigilante. Knowing that, Spider-Man starts looking around for where the cameras and microphones are located. You meddlesome menace. Screwball voices her disdain, while her other half calmly and coolly addresses the vigilante with delight. I expected that someone would attempt to stop us, but I wasn't expecting you. Nor for it to happen so soon. Remembering his previous encounter with Screwball, Spider-Man knows how important it is to play along. Well, what can I say? I like to be punctual. Luckily, it comes easy with his quippage-like nature. He just hopes that he's able to buy himself and the rest of the train passengers enough time by doing so. Alas, the show must go on. Screwball's guest star shares the commentary with the host of the stream like any good professional. That's right, gentle. No pesky bug is going to ruin this one. She starts explaining the scenario that's set up, but it's all just straight yapping. Spider-Man gets tired of hearing it and webs up the announcer system. Yada yada yada. First off, I'm an arachnid, not a bug. And second off, it's time to hit the brakes on this thing. Spider-Man uses the pole he'd been using to support himself as Izuku Midoriya to loop himself around the car before diving through one of the windows. He goes feet first through the glass, free from the confines of the carrier. Once outside, he uses a few web lines to pull himself ahead to the front of the train. Flying alongside the track are familiar-looking drones. Spider-Man waves to them, knowing that they're a direct line to Screwball and her newfound ally. But he doesn't stop to showboat for long, considering time is of the essence for him. Spider-Man clings to the head car of the line, trying to think up a solution to his problem. Stopping a runaway train is going to take some innovation. He finds himself wondering what other heroes would do in this situation. All Might would probably. He gazes down at the rapidly passing of the train track beneath him. It's going to take a lot of strength to pull off, but he figures that it's worth a try. Spider-Man hops down to put himself between the train and the railway. Immediately, he regrets it. Using his legs as a brace to try and stop the powerful force pushing forward doesn't work out so well. If it weren't bad enough using his body as a physical blockade, fragments of the track tear loose and pelt against him due to his foreign presence. Spider-Man jumps back, unable to withstand the pressure. He grabs his calves, tenderly touching them as though that will somehow ease their soreness. The boy sees through his teeth, hissing due to his pain like the steam from the train's barreling treads. That hadn't been the brightest idea. He's not All Might. He's Spider-Man, so he needs to stop the train how he's able to. He remembers how he stopped the airplane from crashing. If it worked once, then it might work again. Spider-Man abandons the first plan and decides to go with his newly improvised Plan B. Web lines, and lots of them, attach themselves to passing buildings. The vigilante anchors the strands on either side of himself. He acts as the connector at the forefront of the train. Whatever strings snap get replaced in an instant. Until the fluid in his current cartilages runs out, he just keeps laying it on thick. It becomes as strenuous as it was when he tried using his legs as brakes instead of his webs, but now on his arms. He's forced flush up against the train's front, pressed against it with all of the pressure of the fighting forces between going or stopping. Izuku screams with all his might, not letting go and not giving up. But the train does start to slow. When an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, this is apparently what happens. Spider-Man stays firm, clinging to the cords that he grips in his hands. Though the web bands stretch to their limit, they don't snap anymore. Gradually, the train's treads clack and churn with less power. The locomotive grinds itself to a lurching halt. Coincidentally, where the train stops is one of its stations. A release of steam from the vessel's overworked engine announces its arrival. Spider-Man releases his hold on his webs, also releasing a lungful of air as he sighs with relief. With that heavy duty of a workout done, he almost feels content with passing out right then and there. But he can't do that just yet. He first makes sure that everyone on board the train is safe and sound, glancing back at them all. Welp, looks like this is your stop. He's out of breath and he can barely get the joke out, but he knows it's necessary after a close call rescue, the same way All Might's soothing smile is. A few chuckles from the civilians he can hear assures him that he properly put them at ease as he intended. Above him, the drones that had been tracking the train and recording everything start to fly off. He wants to follow them back to Screwball's presumably evil lair, but knows that he's currently in no condition. He can hardly carry himself up onto the train's roofing, much less do a high-speed pursuit through the city. And when he hears Shinso calling his name, he's reminded of another cause for concern with swinging off into the sunset. Izuku Midoriya's mysterious disappearance is going to go unexplained because Spider-Man reappearing to retrieve his clothes would be just as exhausting to explain. Izuku sighs, resigning himself to leaving his clothes behind and worrying about giving Shinso an explanation later. Right now, he has to worry about somehow swinging home without throwing out a shoulder blade. First, Izuku replaces the empty web cartilages in his support items with some spares. Then, instead of swandiving over the edge of the locomotive like he'd normally be capable of doing, he takes a ginger step off to ease himself into a soft spin. A long agonized groan flies free with Izuku. He starts web swinging his way home nevertheless, taking his time and not overexerting himself. With his whole body feeling like one big bruise, it takes twice as long to go through the motions. There's no whoops or hollers. He saves his breath for when he wheezes while taking in sharp intakes of air. And he definitely doesn't do any astounding aerial acrobatical moves, not when doing so would be what causes a wipeout. Several times, he even has to stop and squint his eyes due to his vision wobbling or swimming. During one particular bend around a building, his spider sense alerts him to danger. The only problem is that even with his early warning system, he's too tired to do anything about what it is he's being notified of, which so happens to be a kick to the back from somebody else occupying airspace. Spider-Man is sent plummeting down, the wind knocked out of him. Instinctively, he tries spinning a web to catch himself. Instead of the line going taut, he feels it go loose. Whoever hit him has also cut his cord. All Spider-Man can do now is desperately grab for something to cling to. By some lucky chance, he manages to get his grip on a flagpole. A spike of pain stretches across the dangling vigilante's arm as it supports his weight. It would hurt a heck of a lot more if he were to fall further down though, so he doesn't let that stop him from holding on regardless of how strenuous it is. He instead directs his attention to the reason for his current predicament. None other than another enemy from his past has returned to cause him trouble. Hawk's alter ego, the Vulture, hovers over him. No doubt to exact revenge. Spider-Man turns his head down, seeking something to save him. When he finds what he's looking for, he spins a web downward where Vulture can't cut it this time. There's too much throbbing in his head to think up a good enough quip. So he goes with a half-assed attempt, something about airmail, while using his web line to toss a mailbin at Vulture. The aerial attacker bats the mailbin aside. There's not enough force behind it with Spider-Man so weakened, which means the vigilante is completely vulnerable to Vulture's counter move of diving down at him. Unable to jump or pull himself up in order to dodge or evade the incoming attack, Spider-Man is left with only one option. He lets go of the flagpole and goes into a freefall. Vulture passes overhead and the vigilante spins a web to carry himself further away in the other direction. It saves Spider-Man's life, except that Spider-Man is still too siphoned of strength to be moving so rapidly, and he finds himself overexerting his body to a point of collapse. The vigilante tumbles onto a rooftop, rolling across its surface with no refinement or control of the crash. The boy's body aches all akin to protest against his attempt at getting back up. With Vulture barreling down towards him to continue their spontaneous battle though, he doesn't have much of a choice but to tolerate that pain. Spider-Man gets on his feet to stand up, legs wobbling as they try to keep him that way. But by the time that he's gotten himself vertical, he has to throw himself sideways again to dodge an attack. Vulture veers overhead with the full width of his wingspan unleashed. The bladed tips of the feathers slice through the support stand of a water tower. Spider-Man's spider sense screams at him to move, but he's barely able to even get on his feet by the time that the storage tank comes toppling down. Millions of gallons of water within the container crashes over the vigilante. He's knocked to the ground like a surfer going under a wave. What remains of the broken tank lays on top of Spider-Man as rubble. From beneath the wreckage of all that's landed on top of him, Spider-Man stirs with what's left of his remaining consciousness. "You got my suit wet. Now I'm really mad." His voice barely carries itself over his choked coughs. But Vulture's landing is loud and clear. Upon touchdown, heavy metallic boots create a splash from the water that's been spilled. You're mad. You don't know mad. More stomps from the villain walk through the rooftop's giant puddle. I found your little tracking device on me. I know it was you who leaked this side of me to the public. The footsteps grow louder the closer that they get. Spider-Man is about to roll himself over, but one of Vulture's wing extensions beats him to it. The villain places a boot over the vigilante's chest to keep him down. Right then and there, with Spider-Man unable to muster the strength to lift that foot off of himself, Vulture may as well have him dead to rights. Vulture levels the sharpened wing tips of his metallic feathers just below Spider-Man's jugular. Through a shattered eye lens, Izuku defiantly glares against what's basically the Grim Reaper's scythe to his throat. That young rebellious stare gives Vulture some form of pause. The villain also sees a green tuft of hair poking out through another damaged section of Izuku's mask. And after a beat of taking that in, you're just a kid. That becomes a revelation capable of appealing to the hero persona of Hawks. Working under the commission has led to Hawks doing some dirty stuff. The line got so blurred that he more than likely crossed it a few times. But even after all that he's done, even as the Vulture, he never went as far as to kill a kid. Despite having his reputation tarnished, he doubts he can start murdering children now. Hawks spares the boy beneath him, drawing the dagger-shaped feathers of his wings away. But that doesn't mean he'll forget what the brat did to him either. You'll only get mercy from me once. Give up this masked crusade of yours. If I catch you in my skies again, you won't get another chance. A warning is bestowed from Vulture's beaked helmet before the buzzard bats his wings and takes off. Izuku is left laying on the rooftop, where he finally allows himself to succumb to the exhaustion that had been accumulating within him. Yeah, you better fly away. He mumbles a retort that his subconscious mind makes for him. And then, he blacks out. It's slightly less painful to walk home rather than swing. Because of his initial attempt at stopping the train being the usage of his legs, every step sends a stab of muscle strain up from his feet through to his calves. It's significantly better than a stretch of torn ligaments in his arms and shoulders as he tries not to lose his grip on web lines for being at risk of plummeting to certain pancake-shaped doom though. It's also better than having to worry about another ambush. Clearly he isn't capable of defending himself as Spider-Man if he's caught in costume. So, for the time being, he's mild-mannered and ordinary-looking Izuku Midoriya. The bruised boy brushes a hand over his sore spots. His current state reminds him of the days of when he'd get beaten by bullies for being quirkless. There wasn't much that he could do to defend himself then either. The only difference is that now he has no intention of curling up into a ball and surrendering. When it comes to threats from genuinely bad guys like the Vulture, he won't allow himself to be submissive, nor will he back down. There's no hanging up webs or threads for his double life as the wallcrawler just yet. He only needs to rest and recuperate first, and then he'll go and return Vulture the favor. It may be because of that desire for R&R, or maybe it's because he's dressed down and within a few blocks from his house, but Izuku finds himself gradually lowering his guard. Which is why he isn't all that concerned when his spider sense signals him to a potential danger. It's the mistake of ignoring his danger detection that leads to a knife getting pressed against his jugular. Izuku stops short, a hitch in his breath causing his Adam's apple to lean against the edge of the blade touching his throat. Don't try to be a hero. Izuku feels the warmth of a girl's breath tingling behind his ear in unison with his spider sense. Your pal Spider Cutie does that enough, and he's able to tell without the need for 8 eyes like a spider to know just who it is behind him saying such things because of that. He's willing to bet that the blonde girl who works with the hero hunter is one and the same who's currently holding him hostage. And he's also willing to bet that she'll go through with her threat if he doesn't answer her question. You are buddies with him, right? With Spider-Man, Izuku feigns fear well enough thanks to plenty of years practicing with Kaken and his cronies. But the act of innocence can only do so much when someone is actively wanting an excuse to hurt him. The knife pushes into his skin to pressure him into talking faster. I take his pictures, he tips me off, and I snap photos. The knife eases up, but only momentarily, before nearly giving him a close shave. Really? You two never hang out? The girl's tone is one of genuine curiosity, but Izuku is no fool to knowing there's still a real danger to her. As he commonly does nowadays when in high-strung moments, Izuku turns to his knack for humor to hide his anxiety. He's the one who does most of the hanging, but his captor doesn't appreciate it any better than all of the other foes he faces. She raises the knife up to his chin to give it a tap. I'm not sure what it is that you want from me. Izuku bites down on his tongue to keep himself from provoking her with any other jokes that might try to slip out not of his own accord. In truth, he has a good idea of what this femme fatale may want from him. While she hasn't let on to any hints towards suspecting he himself is Spider-Man, there's a chance that she's playing some twisted game with him while actually already knowing. Or, perhaps, she wants to use him as a means to hunting Spider-Man since he's his own personal photographer. It doesn't take a genius to deduce whatever the connection is there. What any girl wants when it comes to their crush. But he doesn't expect the phrasing of her motive to be like she says, I want to stalk him. She sounds more like a yandir than anything else as she yaps like crazy. I can only find so much about him online. It's not like he has a social media page. But you, the one guy he has ties to, on the other hand. Izuku tries gesturing with his shrug while not making it too sudden of a movement that she might cut him. Sorry to disappoint, but I don't have much to tell. He's surprised that the yandir actually sounds considerate rather than upset. Until she resorts back to her threatening of his life. Maybe you aren't that close after all. He wouldn't be all that upset if I killed you then. Izuku finds himself wishing that he had kept his web shooters on. As he is right now, there's not much of a chance of saving himself. I can say in good confidence that I don't think he'd be very happy. He tugs at the collar of his shirt where the top of his suit hides underneath. This would be the one time that he does listen to his spider sense, if it were bothering to buzz anymore. You're probably right. The knife is brought away from his neck and the dangerous situation is alleviated. Somewhat, the girl changes the blade's positioning to where his kidney is located as she leans against his side. He tenses but doesn't react more than that since his danger sense doesn't react. At this angle, he can finally see and confirm that she's the villainous girl that he thought. So I'll just ask you this once. Her voice is venomous and part of him wonders if the fangs that she grins with are as well. Do you know what he looks like under the mask? Izuku is too used to wearing a mask that hides his expressions from people to put on a good poker face. He visibly falters with wide blinking eyes. That's a yes, the girl's grin grows. He feels his face heat up when she presses against him more than the knife currently is. Is he cute? Her own face is just as red but he's pretty positive that it's for a different reason. Izuku stutters, feeling his mouth move as it struggles to say something that won't compromise his identity but won't get him stabbed either. Some might say he's pretty plain looking. Izuku recalls what people said to describe his appearance before and decides to roll with that. It instantly backfires. You're pretty plain looking. The comparison made between himself and his alter ego makes him start sweating more than he already is. The girl either doesn't notice or simply doesn't care though. She's still too in a state of mania, but I bet you would look good covered in red like him. Her cat-like eyes look Izuku up and down. She takes note of his fit form pressing against her own. A girl can look for more than a handsome face. Her hand snakes around his side and up his chest, sharp fingernails just as deadly as her knife. The close contact makes Izuku shudder. It tickles through his clothes but pricks at his skin. She moves her face forward that it nearly mashes into Izuku's. The boy swallows a breath. He's right on the brink of hyperventilating. Just as he believes this girl is about to steal his first kiss from him, her mouth stops short from his. She says, I want to know who he is, and he's reminded that her fascination is with his secret identity as Spider-Man for a reason. He's about to push her away for that reason, maybe even expose his identity for the sake of stopping her. But as it would turn out, he doesn't have to do anything. A third wheel gets in between he and her, disrupting the private moment. Deku. A confused voice grabs a hold of both he and the girl's attention. Kaken. Izuku recognizes the blonde boy who lives on the same block. As for the blonde girl that the blonde boy doesn't know, she recovers from the awkward disruption better than any film actor would be able under improvisation. Hioi, you must be one of Izuku's friends. She enthusiastically greets the newcomer with a cheerfulness that wasn't there before. And the act only gets better when she adds, I won't keep him away from you for much longer, playing to the part that she gave herself perfectly. She leans in towards Izuku's face again, as though she's about to plant a peck on his cheek, but instead whispers in his ear. I'll just come back another time. The foreboding farewell shifts back to her fake friendliness when she breaks away to skip off into the sunset. See ya. And Izuku is left standing in his spot as dumbfounded as the blonde boy across from him. That was. He tries and fails to think of an excuse to hide that he was just held at knife point. Spare me the explanation, but he's fortunate enough that his childhood friend turned bully apparently doesn't need one. I don't care who you're hanging out with. Nerd Kaken grabs a hold of Izuku's shirt. I just don't want you or them anywhere near me. The manhandling gets a little rougher when the blonde bully gives the other boy a hard shove. Got it. AGH. Izuku doesn't need to pretend to be hurt this time thanks to his muscle soreness from being Spider-Man that morning. Gee, got it. He winces while squeezing his stinging side in an attempt to quell the pain. Katsuki pauses, noting that reaction was more dramatic than the other times that he's gotten rough with Izuku. But it's only a momentary pause and nothing more. After a once-over, Katsuki scoffs and says, good, before shoving his hands into his pants pockets and walking away. Izuku pauses after that too, picking up on his old friend's strange hesitation. He'd swear by anything that Katsuki would normally have stayed and done more. But then again, he figures it's about time that he gets an ounce of luck from the day he's been having and decides not to look a gift horse in the mouth. Izuku stands up and dusts himself off. At the rate of familiar foes that he's been encountering, he half expects another one to swoop in and knock him back down. But at long last, he's able to get home and spend the rest of his time recuperating instead. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Deku Becomes Spider-Man. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout-out to JustLow for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on fanfiction.net for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to Deku Fanfic for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.